evening and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the September 12, 2017 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council. It is my sincere privilege to call this meeting to order. If you haven't already done so, there are copies of our meeting agenda on either side of the room on the conveniently placed shelves. And if you'd like to pick up a copy and follow along with our proceedings tonight, there will be multiple opportunities for public comment, both with respect to the items that are on tonight's agenda, as well as a segment under item, where is it? 8. No, yes, item 8. Moved it on me. It's on item 8 tonight, which is reserved for public comments of a general nature with respect to items that are not on tonight's agenda. Before we begin our meetings, it is our proud custom to join together in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. So I would like to ask everyone present to please rise and join us in reciting the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I would now like to ask our fine village clerk, April Holden, to please call the roll.
Commissioner Wallace? Here. Commissioner Earl? Here. Commissioner Waldeck?
Here.
Commissioner White?
Here.
Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 6, which pertains to minutes of past council meetings that we need to approve. We have one set of minutes to approve tonight. Those are our regular council meeting minutes from our September 5th, 2017 meeting. If there are no changes, comments, corrections, or concerns, I will entertain a motion to approve those minutes, please.
I move that this council approve the meeting minutes as presented.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Those minutes are approved. Tonight, I have a couple of proclamations and also a presentation, which I'm going to take all three of them together. And the first one, which I think ordinarily would be under questions and comments of a general nature, I think falls more in the category of proclamation. So I'm going to move it up by executive privilege to item 7. As mentioned, there are 3 different proclamations, 2 of which come, well, one's not really a proclamation, the other one comes with a presentation. So we'll start with the presentation. Many of you who visited the farmers market this summer probably noticed there was a little contest going on in front of the train station with respect to asking folks to learn more about the landmarked homes in Downers Grove and which ones have been landmarked over the last several years. And in particular, a little friendly competition about asking folks who came by to learn about it who was the most favorite landmarked home of that week. And apparently there's a whole system out there keeping track of this, much like fantasy football. I didn't realize that there was fantasy landmarking going on in the village of Downers Grove, and you can draft your own ideal fantasy landmarked home. But anyway, apparently there are actually fabulous prizes to the winners of this contest, which I didn't realize until recently. But I thought, what better place, since we joined in the mission of educating and celebrating historic preservation in our town, that we have representatives of the Friends of the Edwards House here tonight who would like to actually present the winner after the entire season has ended. Well, I'll let them explain the rest. I don't want to steal other thunder. So I'd like to invite up those representatives to the podium. Please tell us who you are, and we'd love hearing more about it. Good evening. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Tully. I'm Christine Martin from 701 Maple Avenue. Shannon and I this summer put together for Friends of the Edwards House the farmers market. We had a booth that we had. We had been wanting to do it for a couple of years, and it finally came to fruition, and it was very, very successful. We found that people were just very, very engaged. They, both children, adults, little kids were picking their favorite house. So it's nice to bring all of that knowledge and be able to present them with our beautiful Downers Grove homes. We also gave out landmark applications. We gave out our fact sheet. We gave out just a lot of information that will hopefully produce some more landmark homes in Downers Grove.
I'm Shannon Tully. I live at 5413 Main Street in Downers Grove. As Christine said, we had over 300 ballots cast for the favorite landmarked house. And although all the properties received votes, there was an overwhelming winner. And we wanted to present that winner, which was Cindy and Fred Zeski, the Foothouse at 1130 Franklin Street, with a certificate. And Mayor, if you could come down and help us do that, we would be honored if you would do that.
I'd be happy to do that, Ms. Tully, but I have heard some complaints about the lawn at that address. It probably needs to be cut. So before we
701 Maple?
issue a ticket, at 54
It's actually
Main Street.
growing, it just needs to be watered some more. It's coming.
The dog is trading very well out of resistance. There you go.
And one more. There you go. Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the grassroots effort and the community continue to educate and celebrate all things historic preservation in our town. We appreciate it, and particularly it's a great public-private partnership. And I understand that apparently there are a number of teams out there that are drafting new landmarked homes so they can compete in next year's competition. Is that what I'm understanding? There's been a hotly followed draft system going on. So we'll look forward to that next year. Thank you very much for sharing that. The next item is a proclamation, because I'm actually holding it in my hand, and this is to celebrate and recognize Constitution Week. And so I will read the proclamation. Whereas September 17th, 2017 marks the 230th anniversary of the framing of the Constitution of the United States of America by the 1787 Constitutional Convention. And whereas it is fitting and proper to accord official recognition to this magnificent document and its memorable anniversary, and to the patriotic celebrations which will commemorate the occasion. And whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States of America, designating September 17th through 23rd as Constitution Week. Now, therefore, I, Martin T. Tully, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim the week of September 17 through 23 of 2017 to be Constitution Week in the Village of Downers Grove, and urge all our citizens to reaffirm the ideals of the framers of the Constitution, which they had in 1787, by vigilantly protecting the freedoms guaranteed to each of us through this guardian of our liberties. And we're very pleased to have Carol Wanschneider here tonight to receive the proclamation. I'd like to invite Carol up to please receive it. It's always a pleasure to see you. Good to see you very much. Please for that. Thank you. Well, actually, no, everyone here at home like that. Oh, yes, I know. It's the network group. They told us you have to be the microphone.
Just one quick statement. The United States Constitution has endured longer than any other constitution in the world and has been used by many other countries as a model for drafting their own constitutions. Please fly your flags. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, I have another proclamation with respect to a topic that I shared with my colleagues a few weeks ago and the community. DuPage County has a new program going on called Do Good, DuPage. And who couldn't do more, who couldn't do with a little more do good, right? Try to say that 10 times fast. I'm going to read the proclamation and then present it to Ms. Chevalier Trivedi, who is the Executive Director of Giving DuPage. And then I would like Ms. Trivedi to please tell us a little bit more about Choose DuPage, or excuse me, not Choose DuPage, I'm thinking of economic development. Do Good DuPage, but we'll address the proclamation first. Whereas, in August 2017, DuPage County and Giving DuPage launched Do Good, DuPage, the biggest service initiative in DuPage County history. And whereas Do Good DuPage is a year-long countywide campaign aimed at promoting service with the goal to have 150,000 people sign up during the year to do one or more, or two, or three good things for their community. And whereas, as the county's volunteer center, the Giving DuPage mission is to promote giving and volunteering by connecting volunteers and donors to the opportunities to give back. Whereas, Giving DuPage celebrates their 15-year anniversary. Their goal is to inspire hundreds of thousands of people to use their talents and skills to improve their communities. And whereas with Do Good DuPage, there are 15 service ideas that people can sign up for that include volunteering, donating items, creating awareness for a favorite cause, or celebrating volunteers, or residents can create their own Do Good ideas. Rumor has it Commissioner Wallace has one. Whereas, residents can sign up for Do Good DuPage at www.givingdupage.org/do good. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Martin T. Tully, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, and members of the Village Council, do hereby urge all DuPage County residents, community leaders, organizations, and businesses to make a positive difference in our community by joining the Do Good DuPage campaign. And Mr. Reddy, if you would please come up, I'd be happy to present this to you. I'm glad to present this to you as a symbol and the affirmation of the Village of Downers Grove's commitment to Do Good and DuPage.
Thank you, thank you.
Just one more. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Tully and fellow council members, commissioners. We are so grateful for this opportunity to sort of chat about Do Good DuPage. But first, let's start with a minute and 42 seconds of hopefully what we think is inspiration.
What would happen if an entire county decided to do good for an entire year? What could happen if 150,000 people decided to unlock our greater potential by doing good? What if families created life memories by volunteering together? What if your employees came together to give back? What if schools decided that service will become their school motto? What if mayors decided to outdo good one another? What if community and faith leaders decided this was the year everyone was going to pitch in? You could do something small or something big or something really huge. We've provided the ideas. Volunteer your time, volunteer your experience. Donate items or services. Create awareness for a cause. Or honor some amazing do-gooders. What could happen if 150,000 people really pulled off the largest service project in our county's history? Let's find out together. All year, we want to hear your do-good story. So sign up to Do Good DuPage for our biggest year ever.
So I'll just take 2 more minutes to kind of, thank you. Will this go? It will. Look at that. You guys are good.
We do tech too.
Yeah, I know. It's awesome. It's very good. So, I just want to take 2 more minutes to kind of talk about Do Good DuPage. I know that Mayor Tully has been incredibly supportive of this initiative from day one. In that part where you talk about mayors outdoing one another, outdo-gooding one another, he is sort of possibly leading the pack. At the risk of upsetting my other fellow DuPage mayors, he might be leading the pack because he's hashtagging all over the place. But It is, this campaign started for Giving DuPage because we're the county's volunteer center, and we are celebrating our 15 years of being here, and we just wanted to take our daily mission of promoting giving and volunteering and kind of up the ante and take it to a level that is unprecedented. So we wanted to try to, I see he's already taking a photo. Ruh-roh Shaggy, he's going to hashtag this, pay attention. Anyways, but so, we just thought, what would happen? It is really just an imagination exercise. We have a county of nearly 1 million people, and we absolutely every day witness generosity in this community and countywide, and we see the goodness and the kind acts that happen and the volunteerism and service that happens, and even informal volunteering of neighbors helping neighbors. But we just thought, what could happen if we put a challenge out there, and we asked for 150,000 people to do 1 or 2 good things, and that's how this began. And really, the campaign couldn't be simpler for everyone to get involved, and this is really our call out to action to all individuals, families, schools, chambers, businesses, houses of worship, service groups, community groups, everyone and anyone, and including mayors. And we just want folks to get involved. So it couldn't be easier. You just start by choosing a do-good idea. We've provided 15, but you can create your own. That's the 16th idea. Then you go do your good deed. You tell us what you did, what the impact was of that do-good story of yours. Get other people involved, and then if you have the time and energy to share it at the hashtag. We would love to see this video get 50,000 plus shares, because we feel if more people hear about this initiative, the more folks will know about it, and we'll actually be able to share the progress in real time. So that's our intention with this initiative. We are very grateful to all of the villages and Downers Grove specifically for giving us this opportunity to share with your residents, and I can't wait to see what you guys do, because I know everybody loves a good challenge, and a little friendly competition to do more good is not such a bad thing. And if we've seen the power of volunteerism in any week, in the last 2 weeks we've seen it 1,000-fold. We've seen the power of that generosity and how it makes a real difference. So let's try to create that same magic in our own backyard. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Shefali.
Thanks for this. If anybody has questions, but otherwise I'll have a seat.
If anyone has questions about Do Good DuPage, you know how to reach Shefali. And we are going to be putting the video on our cable channel here too, so residents will have an opportunity to see it if they didn't see it here tonight.
Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. Well, I know you're all very disappointed, but that is the end of the proclamations and presentations. And that brings us to item 8, which, as mentioned earlier, is reserved for public comments of a general nature. This is an opportunity for members of the audience who have questions or comments of a general nature with respect to things that are not on tonight's agenda. The protocol is to please come down to the podium, tell us who you are, and we would welcome hearing from you. Good evening.
Good evening. Cindy Zeski, 1130 Franklin Street. I am here on behalf of the Friends of the Edwards House. We are happy to announce that on September 23rd from 11 to 3 p.m., we will be holding our second annual landmarked house tour. I, along with Shannon, are the co-chairs for the event. Last year, we opened our doors to 5 Downers Grove landmarked homes to the public. The tour was so well received, we will be doing it again this year. This year, we have 4 homeowners that have agreed to open their doors and help support historic preservation and help educate the community in the landmarking process in Downers Grove. The cost of the tickets are $10, and the proceeds go to help further support the historic preservation program here.
Hi, I'm Shannon Tully, 5413 Main Street in Downers Grove. As Cindy said, we have 4 homes on tour. The first one is the Herring House at 701 Maple Avenue. It's a beautiful Queen Anne Victorian that was renovated by Bo and Christine Martin. The second house is the Vennard House at 4540 Highland Avenue. It's a 1914 American Foursquare that's been beautifully renovated as well. The third house is 1232 Gilbert Avenue. It is the oldest home on our tour. It's a folk Victorian, and it has also been renovated beautifully. And the last house that we have on tour this year is 4709 Linscott Avenue, the Lottie McDougal House. It's also a folk Victorian. It's 123 years old and has only had 3 owners in all that time. So we hope everyone will take the opportunity to buy tickets and help us support historic preservation in Downers Grove. Tickets are available online at friendsoftheedwardshouse.com until September 22nd. And on September 23rd, there will be limited availability the day of the tour. From 10:45 to 12 noon, I will be selling tickets at my office at 943 Maple Avenue in Downers Grove, which is the Realty Executives Grove office. And tickets are going to be a little bit more expensive that day because you waited till the last minute. They will be $15. So get your tickets early. I know some of you have already purchased your tickets, so thank you very much. And I will be looking forward to seeing the rest of those incoming shortly, I hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it. Other questions or comments of a general nature from members of the audience? Good evening, welcome.
Good evening. Rich Calavani, 6825 Camden Road. To keep the theme of historic preservation going, the Friends of the Edwards House is also hosting, in conjunction with the Downers Grove Historical Society, a free event on Tuesday night, September 26th at Emmett, starting at 6:30. And it will be how to landmark your historic property and also the historic home program. So anyone who has a historic home and would like to learn more about this, please join us on September 26th at Emmett. Thank you.
Thank you. So if people want to get into that favorite historic landmark home contest, they have to go figure out how to do it first, right? Very good. Other questions or comments from members of the audience? Questions or comments of a general nature with respect to things not on tonight's agenda? Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening. Hi, everybody. Scott Curran, 4826 Stanley Avenue. Excuse me for this. I'm going to be reading from an email I shared earlier today, so forgive my computer. I want to start by offering 2 kudos, though. One is the social media game in Downers Grove is strong and getting stronger. I have no idea who's responsible for it, but the Downers Grove collateral is awesome and getting better. So whoever's behind that, great job and thank you. 2, to Mayor Tully and the council. Last week, you led a difficult meeting very well, and I think you did it in the interest of everybody in the community, and I want to thank you for that. As we have seen, though, and the nature of my comments relate to the fact that appointments have consequences. In reflecting on the past week and the conversations that have resulted, including with several of you, 2 key and, in my view, inextricably connected issues have arisen related to the appointments process in general. And for clarification, this is not at all related to the current proposed appointee for the library board, who appears at first glance to be a fine selection. This relates to appointments generally, and I'd like to share 2 points. One relates to process. I inquired with several members of the council over the past week regarding the following, what I believe to be simple questions. How is it determined which applicants receive consideration beyond the automatically generated reply noting receipt of their application when they're interested in a board, committee, or commission? 2, does every applicant receive outreach and/or an interview? 3, if not, how is the decision made who does and does not receive further consideration? 4, how do applicants know if they have or haven't been considered, or if they continue to be considered for a position with the Commission of Interest? And finally, if there is no process for that last piece, should there be one? These are standing questions I would welcome a response to at an appropriate time and in the appropriate manner, understanding that that will likely not be tonight. But here's why I think they're important. In the past week, I've learned that upwards of a dozen and maybe more people have applied for various positions in the community, including the library trustee board, throughout recent years. Yet I've also learned that 1, very few of them have ever received any response outside of the notice that their application of interest was received, and 2, some have endeavored to follow up on their applications with limited response or engagement of any kind, and without an opportunity to interview or be considered beyond their initial application. This has included newcomers to our community seeking to engage in public service precisely as the mayor suggested residents consider doing at last week's council meeting. This is a wonderful suggestion and message to be sure, but perhaps it's easier said than done in reality once folks look deeper into the process around who receives appointments. Further, this has occurred while it also appears that some applicants have applied mere days before the mayor makes a recommendation of the appointment. I believe the record reveals this was the case for a recently withdrawn prospective appointee, which is not relevant to everything I'm saying tonight, but is important to note. This sequence of events fairly invites questions. How can there be a group of applicants on file for some period of time, supposedly under consideration, yet someone who appears well connected in other parts of the community comes in at what might appear to be the last minute with no obvious prior interest or record of engagement with the body to which they seek to be appointed, and are nearly immediately selected for priority consideration while other applicants go without ever being contacted or apparently considered? How would newcomers ever have an opportunity to become experienced if never given a chance to serve because those already connected and experienced receive priority, if not the only consideration? The record of appointments and leading candidates also suggests that prior public service within our community is, and not without some merit, weighed heavily for higher level appointments and or perceptions of qualifications for higher public service positions in our community. Accordingly, who is selected and appointed to lower level boards, commissions, and committees is highly relevant. Further, while I appreciate that there's a period during which the council has the ability to consider any proposed applicants, my understanding is also that a little pre-work often goes into determining who the mayor will recommend for appointment, and that the recommendation is often made after some preliminary indication of support for those candidates from council members is received before officially making the recommendation for appointment. If true, this would suggest that the aforementioned period of consideration does not involve as much due diligence of applicants as one might hope. Of course, nobody should be disqualified by virtue of being known, having relationships, or being experienced in service to the community. But nobody should be excluded from consideration because they are new to the community, unknown to those making the appointments, unfamiliar with the process, but who are otherwise qualified to serve. It is the appointment process that should protect against that exclusion and serve towards inclusion and growing the pool of engaged public servants in our community. Finally, my second point, though shorter, which is about diversity. As I shared privately with one of you this weekend via a message I sent while I was at the library with my family on Saturday, the people in our library at any given time, and certainly when I was there on Saturday morning, make the library in our community look like a true melting pot of diversity of which any community can and should be proud. Yet when I look at the library trustees lineup on its website and other commissions, committees, and boards in our community, they do not appear as diverse. Is diversity a litmus test? No. Is it a fair observation? I think so. And in light of recent concerns about diversity, inclusion, and basic human sensitivity, it seems more relevant than ever before. If a talent pool of prospective public servants is restricted or not fully considered, opportunities for diverse candidates to receive proper consideration may also be restricted. And when we know that the boards, committees, and commissions that serve as a starting point for those who are given priority consideration for further and higher appointments are comprised of individuals within a de facto feeder system, what appears to be a constructed slate of viable candidates emerges. Diversity in all of its various forms should be a priority for any community, and I believe it is the responsibility and in the interest of our elected officials to go the extra mile to be diverse and inclusive as they encourage the community to be appointed to or elected to public service positions. So again, with no objection to the recently proposed appointee on the merits, but with a sincere interest in a clear and transparent process and a diversity in the pool of budding public servants in our community, I believe it's important that the residents have clear answers to the process questions I noted above. I would be grateful if the council and staff give the foregoing considerations and work to clarify the appointment process in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gurn. And as you know, you and I have been communicating before tonight about the answer to those questions, and I had indicated that it probably was something that didn't lend itself to the medium of Messenger on Facebook. In fact, what I had planned to do, and my colleagues had even encouraged me to do so, was to simply tonight, and I was going to do it in the mayor's report, go through what exactly the process is. I had met with Alyssa Baker, who spoke here last week about this very topic, and she was very curious as to what the process was, and had heard some things that weren't accurate. I spent a fair amount of time meeting with her over the weekend and walked through the entire process. So I had planned to do it in the mayor's report, but candidly, now that you've sort of brought it up to bear, I'm going to do it right now.
Thank you, and I would just note that I've received...
I plan to do it anyway.
I received different answers and none a straight answer to the appointment process, and I would just note that when a community lacks the ability to say, here's the process, 1 through 4 or 40, it might be an indication that we have work to do, and that is purely the basis.
I'm perfectly happy to walk through it, if everyone will bear with me. I know people are here for other business items, but this is obviously an issue of importance to the community. I'll try to keep it brief, but frankly, I indicated I was going to do this anyway tonight in the mayor's report. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to move it up to the agenda. No better time than while the issue's on the table. So first of all, a little bit of history. The appointment of boards and commissions is done by the mayor with the advice and consent of the village council. So the mayor can simply nominate, but the village council has to approve any nomination. I could nominate all day long unless my colleagues agree. The person does not get nominated. Typically, obviously, the ideal situation would be that whoever is appointed, there is no objection to that person, because who would want to put a volunteer, someone who has put themselves out for public service for no compensation other than the right to sit in a meeting like this and try to contribute to the community, to have them either voted down or split vote. And I think in the 6.5 years that I've been mayor, there may have been one where we had a vote on somebody, where we had a split vote, and maybe a couple of times when I knew in advance there was not going to be full support, so I suggested and the individual agreed to be withdrawn. But out of the approximately 211 people that in 6.5 years I've either appointed or reappointed, we've had absolutely no issue whatsoever, and there's been nothing that of any consequence. So the process has changed over time. There frankly is no process. It has changed with a number of different things that we handle, such as how we handle standing committees, where we sit when we meet. Basically, every council, as part of our governance structure, will talk about the appointment of board and commission members. And I don't remember when we had our governance meeting for the 2017-2019 council, but I know that the appointment of board and commissions was discussed during that public meeting. I don't remember the details. I don't remember if anybody was in attendance. I don't remember if anybody watched. But over the years, the mayors have done different things depending on who that was. So my predecessor did it differently than me. His predecessor did it differently than him, and so on and so forth. I've actually, frankly, changed the way I've done it over time. Because there are approximately 16 boards and commissions that we have to appoint members to. The members of those boards range anywhere from 6 to 9 members, so you can do the math on how many people serve on our boards and commissions. That's something we're blessed to have in the community. The terms are staggered, so approximately every year there are some people who are coming up for reappointment or who decide that they do not wish to be reappointed. And every year we ask, do you wish to be reappointed? If not, let us know. We now have a vacancy to fill. If you wish to be reappointed, then that is something that's brought to my attention. So approximately August, which is the time of year when there will be some group of terms will come up, it's very simple. The current way that it works, but it hasn't always worked this way. Some mayors have left all the nominating and appointing, not the appointing, but the nominating to members of the village council. I've tried that before, but with no due respect to my current colleagues or past colleagues. People are busy, and sometimes the time for the appointment will come and go, and I don't have any nominations because the person wasn't able to get to it, so I end up doing it myself. Because we have boards and commissions that need to have so many people on their boards, otherwise they have problems with a quorum and they can't do their business, which is making recommendations to this board. So the important thing is having a full board or commission. There is a timing element to it. What I've been doing for the last number of years is I've been making the appointments myself, and the process is very simple. When I'm advised that there's a vacancy on any board, or in approximately August of every year when there are inevitably positions that have come up for reappointment or not, the first thing that staff does prior to that is to identify who is interested in being reappointed. And I will get a report of here are the people whose terms are up, here's who would like to be reappointed, here's who has said that they would like to move on or serve on a different board or not serve at all anymore. Typically I will ask a question of those people, what was their attendance like? Because if they're not going to meetings, then obviously perhaps it's time for them to have someone else serve. Because one thing that we've been very blessed by is having way more people apply for vacancies than we possibly could fill. The library board alone, I think, even before recent events, had over 50 people on the list of interested applicants, and we have one seat come up every year, every several years. I mean, they're 6-year terms, so they don't come up that often. So it's impossible to appoint anywhere near the number of people who have demonstrated interest in the library board, just for an example. Some of the other boards, we have people that serve on for a long time, like the fire pension board, the police and fire pension boards. They don't have vacancies very often, so they don't come up. But to get back to the story, staff will identify that, and then typically, I just simply ask for a list of everyone who's applied and their applications. We have always solicited from the public people to apply to our boards and commissions. And speaking of social media, in recent years in particular, we've done social media blitzes to advise the community that we have boards and commissions. Anyone who is interested in applying, please do so. Our website has a portal that anyone can go on, and by filling out a very simple, I think it's a 1 or 2 page form, they can apply for a board and commission, and they give some basic information. I won't go into the details. Some people will attach a multi-page CV, a resume. Other people will simply say, I've lived in the community 16 years, I'm interested in getting involved, and I work as an engineer for ComEd. They put on whatever information they choose, but typically they have to provide their name, some ability to contact them, and that they demonstrate they actually live in the village of Downers Grove. You'd be amazed, sometimes we actually have people apply who don't live in town, and they kind of take themselves out of contention by that very fact. I simply look at all those applications. That's the first line. I find out where do we have vacancies or where do we have reappointments, and I will look at the applications of anyone who has applied, understanding that every board is a little bit different. Some of the boards require certain expertise, some by code, for example. The municipal code, for example, requires that the Architectural Design Review Board is constituted of people who have certain professional backgrounds. There must be someone from the Historical Society. There must be someone who's an architect. There must be someone who's an attorney, someone who's from the development community. So those profiles, I have to actually find people that fit those profiles. And if I don't have people who have applied that fit those profiles, I have to go out and find somebody, which I will then ask around, hey, who do you think might be a good person? And from time to time, I'll ask my colleagues if they have any suggestions in that regard. Other boards will attract certain people because they're interested in, for example, community events. Other people are interested in parking and traffic. Some people are interested in Environmental Concerns Commission. I must confess that when I see a retired 30-year EPA scientist apply for the Environmental Concerns Commission, you betcha he jumps up to the top of the list, and that's a person I think would be very well qualified for that position. But basically what I'm looking at is I'm looking at why they want to serve and what their background is. And depending on what their background is on paper, people very easily will sort of gravitate towards certain positions. Sometimes I'll find someone who's applied for one board but may look more qualified for another board. So for example, someone has an accounting background, even though they're interested in the Stormwater and Floodplain Oversight Commission, they may instead be better candidates for one of the pension boards, which deals with more financial issues. By the way, the chairman of our Stormwater and Floodplain Oversight Commission is a stormwater administrator in another town. That is what qualifies him to be in that position. So most of the initial selection is done based purely on qualifications and what it is that they do and whether they would fit in a particular board, understanding that you don't always want to have on the Liquor Commission all lawyers. You do want to have people that from different walks of life, different perspectives, but having some people representing that profession is a good idea. But you don't want to have all lawyers on any board, God forbid. The Planning Commission, for example, you want to have people that represent different segments of the community, different stages of life, different professional backgrounds. Some people have lived here for 30 years. Some people have lived here for 3 years. I would say that of the applications that I see, I may know a handful of people. Most of the people I don't know from Adam or Eve. I look purely based on what their background is and what their qualifications are, and whether in my personal opinion, based on 6.5 years as mayor and 8 years as a trustee, and my understanding of how the boards and commissions work, whether they might be suitable for a certain board or commission. Then, if once I picked out a few people, I usually pick out 3 or 4 people for one spot, I will email them or call them and ask them whether they are still interested, because you'd be surprised how many times I've had people who are on the list, and by the way, staff will annually vet the list and ask whether people who are on the list still wish to be on the list. So I'm a little surprised to hear that people don't hear any or saying they're not getting any feedback, because my understanding is that every year we ask anyone on the list whether they're still interested in being on the list, which would be a point of contact. Notwithstanding that, and if that's not the case, then that's obviously something we can do better at. But even that being the case, you'd be surprised how many times I will call someone and say, hey, gosh, you look like you'd be a great fit for the Stormwater Floodplain Oversight Commission. Would you like to serve? Yeah, work's really tough right now. I can't. Maybe next time. Okay, then I'll move to the next person, and so on and so forth. Some people need to get it clear with their employer first, and sometimes they've been able to, sometimes they haven't. Some people are in the midst of wanting to start a family, and they're just not in a position to serve on a board or commission. But I have an initial phone call discussion with them, and I let them ask me questions about the Board of Commission. I direct them to the website. They can look at the minutes of the Board of Commission and come back and tell me whether they think they can do the job. And if they say yes and they're still interested, then typically what I will do is I will pass that person's name on to village staff to share with the village council. And typically, not always, but I'd say it's approximately 3-4 weeks, maybe somewhere between 2 and 4 weeks before they are put on an agenda for approval. The village council is provided with the person's name, address, phone number, contact information, all the same information I have. And I tell the applicant when I tell them I'm going to be recommending them that they may be contacted by any member of the village council with questions. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. That's entirely up to my colleagues. So at that point in time, the due diligence is entirely up to my colleagues. What they want to look at, whether they want to look at something, they can meet with the person, call the person, do whatever they wish. And then the Friday before the item is on the village council agenda, just like any other item, it's published to the public Friday afternoon before a Tuesday action on Tuesday evening, the following Tuesday evening. And so at that point in time, the members of the public know the person's name and whatever, I think the name and the board that they are being recommended for. We don't have their application in there. But the member of the public can clearly weigh in. And once in a blue moon, we've had comments. I can think of maybe 2 occasions in 6.5 years where the public's had something to say about a board or commission appointment. But I will also tell you just my own personal view on this is I actually have been a very strong advocate for increasing diversity on our boards and commissions. Case in point, this doesn't happen very often, but within the last 2 years, we had the opportunity to appoint 2 members to this board prior to the last election. And we had 13 applicants. Of those 13 applicants, 3 were women. There are 2 women who were appointed to the village council. And that was something I felt very strongly about because I would like the village council, when I had the ability to choose it, as opposed to the electorate, to more fairly represent the makeup of the community. And I'll just underscore that too. The makeup of the community is something to take into account here. If you look at the census data, our community is made up of the constituency that it is made up of. And more or less, our boards and commissions are reflective of the demographics of this community based on the census. But that being said, for example, on the Liquor Commission, my last appointment to the Liquor Commission, I was looking for someone who could come in as an attorney to replace an attorney that had left that board or commission. And that person who's, this was a little while ago now, but that person who I recommended and the board approved is an African-American woman who is doing a wonderful job and exactly as I expected an attorney to do on the Liquor Commission, which also has to deal with disciplinary hearings and also applying our liquor code to different requests either for licenses or if someone is in violation of our liquor ordinance, making a recommendation to me as the liquor commissioner for a potential disciplinary action. I can say that with respect to the library board, the last 2 appointments, I don't think this is any secret. It was indicated to me that the board was made up of folks who did not necessarily have children who utilized the junior room. So the request was made to me, could you please possibly, if you find the people otherwise qualified and interested in serving for the right reason, which is not some single issue, but just to benefit the community, someone who has children who would utilize the junior room so that the board would be reflective of a different perspective in terms of the user. So the last 2 people, actually the last 3 people I've recommended have all fit that criteria. So every now and then there will be a suggestion from someone, either staff or village council members or the director of for example, the library, who would say, hey, gee, we'd like to maybe have some more perspectives from the community with respect to this job. Could you take that into consideration when you're selecting your next person? And I'm always open to that. And then the process is, of course, the names go on to an agenda on a Tuesday night meeting. I always invite the people who have been recommended for new appointments to attend. If they're there, I'd like to recognize them and thank them for their service because we rely upon our boards and commissions to make recommendations to us. It helps us do a better job. It allows for more input from the community to the village council in a way. And by the way, all the boards and commissions all meet in public, and so any member of the public who is not on a board or commission can attend any board or commission meeting, and even if they're not on the board or commission, they can always speak during segments like public comments that we had here tonight and express their views on any topic addressed by that board, whether it's the library board, the transportation and parking commission, community events commission. They are all public meetings. People don't usually attend unless there's something that is particularly interesting them. But all those board and commission members are also directly available in their public meetings, which are noticed just like ours, to any member of our community to come in and address about anything related to the subject of their particular area. So, for example, Stormwater Floodplain Oversight Commission, typically people will attend who are interested in that topic. And then the people will be on the agenda for a vote, and the vote is public. You'll see our votes here tonight. And as I said, in approximately 211 appointments, I think we've had unanimous support just about every time. So I wanted to share that with the community anyway, because enough people had asked me what the process was, and I plan to share that on the mayor's report, but thank you for bringing it up, and might as well address it right now. And I appreciate the patience of everyone in the audience for allowing me to take the time to explain that. But you now can see why, Mr. Kern, it was going to be a little difficult to put all that in response to a Facebook post.
Can't wait to see it on the website.
Well, it will be on the website tomorrow because, of course, our meetings are recorded and on YouTube, and anyone can take that little bit of it, and you can take my last 15 minutes and broadcast it to the world because, of course, we believe in transparency and go out of our way to try to do that as much as possible. So thank you for bringing that to the table, and I appreciate everyone else's patience. With that, are there any other questions or comments of a general nature with respect to items not on tonight's agenda? Or did I just suck all the oxygen out of the room? All right, very good. Thank you. And I appreciate the questions and comments that we had. We'll move on to item 9, which is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Mayor Tully, I move that this council approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to any of the items on tonight's consent agenda? Questions or comments from members of the village council? Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl? Aye. Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. The consent agenda passes unanimously. That brings us to item 10, our active agenda. We have several items on tonight's active agenda. First, item 10A is an apple. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance rezoning certain property known as owned by Flavor Chem Corporation?
Mayor Tully, I move that this council adopt an ordinance rezoning a certain property owned by the Flavor Chem Corporation as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments from members of the audience? This is a motion to rezone, but go ahead.
Well, this will apply to everything, so I'll just get it out of the way then.
Very good.
My name is
Good evening,
Mark-
welcome.
Good evening. My name is Mark Brackev, and I'm the owner of 2901 Finley Road, Downers Grove, which is directly adjacent to Flavor Chem. I'm here tonight to warn the residents of Downers Grove of the unprecedented step Mayor Tully and the council is about to take. Mayor Tully and the council are about to gift a public street to a single private corporation, Flavor Chem, because they need more parking. Many of the businesses and owners on Center Circle and Brook Drive were stunned when they found out. Even some were dismissive about it and said there's no way they can do that legally. Well, that's exactly what's happening here tonight. Tonight, a big private corporation, Flavor Chem, is going to steamroll over the objections of dozens of other small businesses, steamroll right over the Village of Downers Grove Planning Commission, who voted 6-1 to reject this plan to shut down Brook Drive for the sole benefit of one company. Why should the residents of Downers Grove care about the closing of a public street for the benefit of Flavor Chem? There are no homes in this industrial park, no voters to offend. Until the day comes when Mayor Tully and the council comes to shut down your street to appease someone or some company more important than you. The closing of Brook Drive is a clear overreach by Mayor Tully and the council, and if left unchecked will lead to more big private corporations getting special deals while small businesses and private citizens are thrown by the wayside. When Flavor Chem first petitioned to close Brook Drive to expand a parking lot for their sole exclusive use, they were asking for a vacation of the land. They were not even going to have to pay for the land, nor reimburse the Village of Downers Grove for the complete rebuild of Brook Drive that was recently completed, until they realized that doing so would put them on shaky legal ground. Flavor Chem, Mayor Tully, and the council put their legal minds together and were able to get around this issue by changing the petition to grant a license to Flavor Chem to close Brook Drive. What is the difference between the vacation of land and a license? According to Mayor Tully at the last council meeting, there's a big difference between a vacation and a license. That may be legally true, but it's morally wrong. It's wrong to take a public street and turn it into a private parking lot for Flavor Chem. One of the duties of the Village of Downers Grove is to make rules and decisions so that everyone, every business, gets treated fairly, equally, and without favoritism. These ordinances and this resolution are for the sole benefit of Flavor Chem, but it's at the expense of all the other businesses and citizens that use Brook Drive and Center Circle. This is a serious wake-up call to the residents of Downers Grove. I hope you're paying attention.
Thank you for your comments. Other questions or comments from the audience on this item? Motion to rezone. Good evening, welcome.
Hi again. My name's Steve Giesler. I live at 1214 Maple Avenue here in Downers Grove. I'm one of the owners of the building at 1501, 1503 Brook Drive. It's on the southwest corner of Brook Drive and Downers Drive. First of all, I'd like to thank the village staff for addressing two of the issues I raised at the meeting last week, specifically ensuring that large trucks will be able to get into and out of our west parking lot. And also clarifying that we won't be responsible for any of the costs associated with maintenance or snow removal in the Brook Drive right-of-way or whatever it's going to be called if this goes through. But having said that, we are still strongly opposed to the closing of Brook Drive. It's a very good deal for Flavor Chem, and it's a very bad deal for the rest of us in the area. From our perspective, it's as simple as that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Other questions or comments from members of the audience with respect to the motion to adopt an ordinance rezoning property?
One more. As long as
Please.
we're addressing all of these issues, at this time I understand that the ordinance related to the licensing of Brook Drive isn't up yet, but as long as we're getting these public comments out of the way, let's do it now. My name is Michael O'Connor. I'm an attorney. I represent United States Brass and Copper, which owns the properties at 1401 Brook Drive and also at 1418 Center Circle. I was in front of this council last week. I appeared several times in front of the Planning Commission. Our objections to the now licensing of Brook Drive, I think, are well documented, and I won't bore you with all of our objections. I'm sure you're well aware of them. But I want to point out that I read carefully the city or the village staff's findings of fact, and I don't find them to be with merit. There are conclusions without any supporting facts. One of the findings of fact, and the questions to be reviewed when determining whether to vacate or license a street, the consent of the two property owners. Obviously, Flavor Chem represents those two property owners. Well, the next question is the property still necessary for the public use? Of course it is. You have all of the neighbors in this area saying, we still desperately need this street. And whether you're giving it away as a vacation or as a license, you're ignoring the fact that a number of the neighbors in this area who use this street day in and day out, whose livelihoods and whose businesses rely on this street, are telling you, please, do not vacate this street. Whether you vacate it, whether you license it, do not close this street. Flavor Chem's own traffic study has indicated that closing Brook Drive will have a negative impact on the businesses in the area and the intersections. Don't ignore that. Don't ignore it. It's too important. The next question is, should the street be vacated? No, it should not be vacated. We've already made that clear. There's nobody other than Flavor Chem who has come before this council and said this street should be vacated. The compensation. Should there be compensation? In the findings of fact, the village staff pointed out that Flavor Chem's own appraisal indicated that this section of Brook Drive was worth $380,000. And then staff made the statement that that payment should be waived. that the village should not require that payment from Flavor Chem without any explanation, without any justification whatsoever. So now, the village is going to be giving up Brook Drive to a private company for no compensation and without putting that property back onto the public rolls. It makes no sense. They won't be recovering any compensation, and the village won't be recovering any real estate taxes based on that private use of public land. The change from a vacation to a license, we don't understand it. We all understand what the difference is between a vacation and a license, but we don't understand why it was changed in this particular case. And the only thing we can speculate on is that it was changed from a vacation to a license to circumvent the higher standards for vacating a street. And it makes it easier to waive the $380,000 value for that piece of land. It makes it easier to ignore the fact that that property will still not be on the public tax rolls. So it appears to be designed to circumvent those higher standards. Finally, and I'm done at this point, I assure you that the property owners in this industrial park cannot sit by and let that street be vacated or closed. They cannot let that happen. It has too much of a negative impact on their property. And so if this council approves the licensing and closing of Brook Drive, then these property owners will be forced to investigate alternatives to enjoying the closing of Brook Drive. It is simply too important to the value of their properties and the operations of their businesses. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Other questions or comments from the audience with respect to the motion to rezone property? Good evening, welcome.
Hello, well, thank you. My name is Kevin Halpin. I'm here on behalf of Elite Electronic Engineering. We operate at 1516 Center Circle, and we also own the adjacent property at 1500 and 1430 Center Circle. We have 75 employees, and we've been at that location since 1975. I apologize if my voice is a little raspy. I spent the day going door to door around the business park to talk to all the other business owners and property owners to, first of all, make sure they were aware of this resolution before the council, and also get their opinion on it. And so here's what I found. I got a total of 47 signatures on a petition to oppose the resolution to license the Brook Drive right-of-way to Flavor Chem. And of that includes 32 separate businesses. I have signatures from the owners or general managers of 32 separate businesses who oppose this. So I talked to a total of 34 businesses. Of those 34, 32 signed opposition to this resolution. The other two who didn't sign it either were not the local managers or owners, or they were indifferent on this. I didn't find anyone who was in favor of closing the street. Exactly no one. And this doesn't even cover all the business residents of Center Circle. These were the ones I could get to in a day. And of all those 32 businesses who opposed these resolutions, it includes approximately 320 total employees collectively. I think that's a low side estimate of the number of employees of those 32 separate businesses. Also, I found out that the majority of those business owners had no notification that these resolutions were under consideration. This was me telling them was the first time they had heard that this was happening. And I think their reactions to the closure of that street and the impact on their businesses was telling. Most people had a very surprised reaction, and one that was dismissive, as the gentleman earlier mentioned, because they thought, there's no way that's going to pass. There's no way they can do that, just vacate a public street and hand it over to a private company. But they signed the petition anyways, just to make sure that it wouldn't happen. So, I mean, my goal today here is to just give the council and the staff the facts of the other businesses in the area. We can sit here all day and tell you why we think it's a bad idea, the 4 or 5 businesses who are here represented. But I wanted to tell you of the other 32 businesses around that, and I could probably get more tomorrow, but I have 32 signatures right now from business owners who oppose this resolution. So the facts of this are that Flavor Chem is going to license a public road at zero cost. They will not be compensating the Village of Downers Grove either upfront or through taxes in the future. It will be for the sole benefit of Flavor Chem. They will be the only ones who can use this property. It will become their private property. The closure of Brook Drive will restrict access to all the other dozens of businesses in the area, which have a larger economic impact than Flavor Chem does. And as I stated before, many of the businesses had not been notified about this action, so they had no opportunity to oppose it or come out in support of this resolution, either way. So those are the facts of the case that we have in front of us right now. And I think if the council decides to pass this resolution, it sends a clear message to the rest of the business community and the residents around Downers Grove that if you are a big business, we will go out of our way to close a public street that other businesses and citizens depend on. And that if you are a small business, we don't care about your concerns or your growth as a business within our community. So how does that encourage how does that make an inviting business environment for other businesses to come here and start, especially small businesses? And how does that encourage further business investment? In fact, some of the people I talked to even got the idea to start looking elsewhere outside of Downers Grove to move their businesses to if their property values were going to decline, if it was going to be harder for them to lease space, if it was going to be harder for their customers to find them, if it was going to be harder for their employees to get to and from their businesses. So they're already thinking outside of Downers Grove to move their businesses. So the other message is that you're choosing one business request over the concerns and objections of dozens of other businesses in the area who will be directly impacted by this. So that's all I have to say. I can provide you copies of this petition with signatures. This is the original. I can provide an electronic copy tomorrow morning to the village. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Other questions or comments from members of the audience on the motion to rezone property?
I'm David Haugen.
Good evening, welcome.
I'm David Haugen. My address is 4826 Forest Avenue. I had a number. I don't have a business interest in this. My interest is process. And so I examined the 113 or 140 page document, and I searched for the word license, thinking that perhaps I would find an ordinance, a regulation, some governmental citation of this is a license and this is what you do when you establish a license, just as you might establish a lease. And to my surprise, I couldn't find any such thing. So my question is, does the final resolution that you're going to be considering, does that constitute the license? Or is there a separate document, like a lease, that is the license?
We haven't gotten there yet, sir. Item 10C is in Charlie is a resolution to authorize an agreement with Flavor Chem Corporation providing for a license with respect to Brook Drive, and the resolution is entitled a resolution providing for a license agreement. We just haven't gotten there yet. We're still talking about the rezoning.
Okay, then.
But so the answer to your question is yes. The word license actually appears numerous times.
Yes, I know.
It comes in the form of the resolution adopting an agreement.
I will. I wanted to mention, someone mentioned here, the last speaker mentioned that the neighbors got no notification of rezoning. And that surprises me because I, as a homeowner, when there's going to be a rezoning or a new traffic control within 2 blocks of my home, I get a letter that says this is what's going to be happening, and sometimes there's a posting on the property that says there's going to be a hearing.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if we have a disconnect between...
There is a disconnect, sir. All that happened pursuant to village ordinance, no different than the situation you're describing. Written notification was given, there was a sign posted on the property, just like we do for anything.
Okay.
With a phone number to contact.
That pleases me very much because, again, I'm interested in the process. That's all that I had to say about the rezoning, because I would have thought that people would be notified, and you've informed me that people were notified.
Consistent with our ordinances, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from members of the audience with respect to the motion to adopt an ordinance with respect to the rezoning of this property? Okay, thank you for the questions or comments on that. Questions or comments from members of the village council on the rezoning ordinance? I just simply say that the standards for rezoning have clearly been demonstrated, and I haven't heard anything to the contrary. May I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl? Aye. Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. That matter passes unanimously. That brings us to item 10B as in boy. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance to designate the property at 1500, 1509, 1515, 1516, 1525, and 1528 Brook Drive, and 1429, 1503, 1505, and 1515 Center Circle as planned unit development number 59 in the village of Downers Grove, and authorize a campus master plan for Flavor Chem Corporation?
Mayor Tully, I move that we approve the motion recited as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments from members of the audience with respect to this motion, the creation of a planned unit development number 59? Questions or comments from members of the council? Roll call, please.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace? Aye. Commissioner Earl? Aye. Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, that matter also passed unanimously. That brings us to item 10C as in Charlie. Do I have a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing an agreement with Flavor Chem Corporation providing for a license with respect to Brook Drive?
Mayor Tully, I move that this council adopt a resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement providing for a license with respect to Brook Drive between the village of Downers Grove and Flavor Chem Corporation as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments, any additional questions or comments from members of the audience? Yes, please, sir.
David Haugen, 4826 Forest Avenue. Again, I have no financial interest in this. I'm only interested in process. I wanted to know, I did not read every word of that long document, and I admire you if you did read it all. I wanted to know, is that license revocable?
Yes, I believe, I'd have to look at it myself again, refresh myself, but if the business no longer functions as designed with tonight's proposals, it would revert back to the village.
Is that in the document?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In the document, does it provide that the village, who I assume still owns the street, has the right to inspect, evaluate whether the terms of the license are being met, and take action if not?
Yes, and there's also the improvements will be made to it, which have to be done consistent with our building code and the terms of the agreement. I believe there's also a water main or a sewer main that runs under the street, so we will have to have access to that as a public entity. Yes, sir.
Okay.
It cannot become a privately owned.
All right. I noticed that part of Brook Drive is going to be renamed to Flavor Chem Drive. Is there a process for doing that? And will that create a need for anyone to change their mailing address?
The answer to the second part of your question is no.
Okay. And finally, I noticed that they were to return the village's lighting to the village, and I assume that that would be in a functional condition. And if not, if they weren't functional, they just sort of chopped them off. you wouldn't be very happy.
I would agree that if they were chopped off, I would not be very happy. I believe they will be removed consistent with the way you would want to remove something so it could be installed somewhere
So
else.
the wires are still there and...
Nuts and bolts, yes.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Other questions or comments on item 10C? Yes, please, sir. Good evening, welcome.
My name is Dave Kavanaugh, and I'm the president of United States Brass and Copper. We own 2 properties in this industrial complex that you've been talking about. I drive those streets every day, including some Saturdays. My employees do too. We work on Saturdays. We know the congestion, we know the need for those streets. And by the way, I purchased that land in 1976. And part of the purchase proposal was a design where Brook Drive and Downers Drive were used as access to Butterfield Road and Finley. And they also publicized access to 88 and the future 355. So on your actions tonight, I can tell you I'm very disappointed in the vote and in the outcome. But where my real disappointment lies is with Mayor Tully and each of you individually, because I attended the zoning meetings also, and they were very proactive. The zoning members were into this with heart and soul, and they tried to find out why we were so against this move. And I did not hear, I have hearing aids, so I could miss things. I did not hear any of you participate in a conversation which would lead up to the decision you made. And that is my real disappointment. And it's a disappointment that I have for Downers Grove right now. And thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Other questions or comments? Members of the audience, please. Good evening, welcome.
Hi, Mary Ann Badke, 5408 Carpenter. I actually came here for the later items, but kind of piqued my curiosity. Did I hear correctly that, I don't know if it was the plan or the zone commission, 6 out of 7 said don't do it?
The Plan Commission voted against the proposal, and as I understand it, were principally hung up on the proposed waiver of the $388,000 fee for what was then going to be a requested vacation of the street. The Plan Commission, of course, is a recommending body. Sometimes we agree with them, sometimes we don't, sometimes we do something different. But we do read and listen to everything that was said at the meeting and then do our own due diligence. I know some of my colleagues actually spent a day out there checking this out and then requested some changes be made after some of the issues that were brought up after the Plan Commission, including some things I think are mistakenly attributed to flavor cap. But the Plan Commission, as I understand it, was primarily hung up on that issue, and that is really a village council decision. It's our policy as a village council to whether to waive any fees or whether to allow any granting any request for vacation, whether it's a residential street or right of way or anything. And we get requests all the time like that. So we have a policy for it, but ultimately it's the village council's decision. It's not something we typically look for the Plan Commission to make a recommendation to us. But yes, they did. That was their vote. But as I understand it from having read the materials and the other issues that came up, and there were some other issues that the Plan Commission raised, but that was the big one.
Okay, and I'm, excuse me, coming into this totally blind, but I don't know, there just has a ring to it of, I'm having a deja vu back to last year and the whole Maple and Main thing where I feel like there's big disconnect of what's really good for the area versus what is financially good for the moment. And I think that's a real concern. Sort of my general concern overall.
Thank you for your comments.
Mayor Tully, I'm going to have to object to your class, how you are interpreting the Plan Commission's what they're hung up on. It was specifically said by the Plan Commission to Flavor Chem, can you do this without closing the road? Come back to us with a plan where you don't close the road. So whatever you just said about whatever their hang-up was, they specifically said, don't close show us a plan that doesn't close the road. That was their specific. You can go back to the Plan Commission videotape and you can hear it. But it was not closing the road was the Plan Commission's overwhelming.
Sir?
Yes.
Please, we're not here to debate this. You've made your comments. My colleagues read both meetings, Plan Commission meetings on this.
It was less than 5 minutes.
Please, continue if you have more.
No, that's it.
No, there's not a record, sir. We're not debating this. You've made your comments, and we obviously agree to disagree. I'm entitled to my own assessment of what would happen, as are you. But we're not going to sit here and debate this back and forth. Thank you. Other questions or comments from members of the audience?
Hello again. I'd just like to add on to my previous comments about this license agreement and share a little anecdote about our company and our strive to expand within our footprint as well, which is the same thing that Flavor Chem is trying to do. And I know all the business owners that have talked to you this evening, I think we can all agree that it's great that Flavor Chem is doing well, that they're being successful. We wish all the businesses in Downers Grove to be successful. And that the efforts of the Village Council and the staff to help accommodate businesses when they need it is laudable. But when you're choosing one business over dozens of others who will be negatively impacted by that, then it requires a little bit more creativity in order to accommodate them, I think. So the story I wanted to share is over the last couple of years, our business has been expanding. We're busting at the seams within our building, so we were trying to find some place to expand to. And one of the big problems was parking. We were hiring more people, we had more customers, we needed more parking. So one of the things apparently we could have done is come to the council and say, can you close the street in front of our business so we can build a parking lot? We didn't consider that an option because that's ridiculous. So what we did is we talked to our neighbors. We tried to come up with a solution because we knew they had parking lots that they were not utilizing fully. And we came to an agreement with our neighbors where we could rent parking spaces from our neighbors. And that solved our problem without having to close a public street, without having to impact the people next to us, and it even helped them out by generating some revenue for using empty space that they had. So I think applying, as the gentleman before me just said, come back with a proposal that doesn't require closing the street. You've just passed 2 resolutions that will rezone Flavor Chem's entire area, create a campus. Why not ask them to use some of that space to accommodate their parking and pedestrian needs that doesn't require closing the street and impacting everyone else? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from members of the audience with respect to the item 10C? Well, thank you for those that did speak. Questions or comments from members of the Village Council? Commissioner Barnett.
I just want to clarify a couple things. My understanding of the Shive-Hattery traffic study is that they suggested that the changes as a result of the Flavor Chem campus expansion would not materially affect the intersection operations. Is that correct?
That's correct.
They were relatively low grade, but considered acceptable by urban standards as is, and not projected to degrade. And while I can certainly appreciate patterns and behaviors and histories, nobody loses access to either Findlay or Butterfield under this scenario. So we can debate whether it should be charged for or not charged for. And certainly, I guess the first guy to ask close the street has a certain advantage. But nobody in this office park loses access to either Findlay or Butterfield as a result of this, and the only traffic study information we have suggests that those intersection performances will remain as is. That, to me, is a pretty material issue as we try to decide the impact on the neighbors in the area of actually going through this effort. I'm satisfied that those conditions are not materially impacted negatively, and therefore, with that set aside, I feel like the opportunity to be a partner with one of our community participants and businesses is a good one that we should take advantage of. Also, I think, I couldn't find it just now, but I remember last week there was a diagram I think I saw that essentially provided, while the street was closed and turned into largely parking, we still had emergency access. I think I remember seeing that. And so it's not as though a wall is being built, so to speak. So I'm in favor of this and hope that hope my colleagues will join me.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments? Commissioner Waldeck.
Very quickly, Mayor, we heard public comment, and it's all appreciated. I know all the members of the council have worked on and studied this for weeks, if not at least a few months. For anybody at home that would like information, you just go on the village website, go to this week's meetings, you can go to the items, you can click on it, and you're welcome to look at the 114 or so pages and decide yourself how you feel about it. But anyway, I will be supporting this measure. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments from members of the council? Oh, Commissioner White, sorry, I didn't know if you were nodding at Commissioner Earl or me.
No, just raising my pen to indicate. My thoughts on this are, well, I concur that no one is being denied access, and no one is forced to choose Finley over Butterfield. You simply have to go around just a little bit farther, not all that much farther. The question that was raised, can this be done without closing the road? If they could build the campus they want without closing the road, that would be my preference. But I'm persuaded, I believe that Flavorchem cannot build the corporate campus that they need without this stretch of land to connect the two pieces of land they own on either side of Brook Drive. And then with regard to the license agreement, I believe that's an appropriate way to proceed in this case because it clarifies that it's the Flavorchem campus that deserves the use of this portion of the public land. And when that use ends, when at some point in the future, hopefully long from now, Flavorchem moves their campus, Brook Drive will be reopened. And that's the whole point, that as long as Flavorchem has their current campus, it's not it's permanent as long as Flavorchem stays. But if the campus leaves, Brook Drive will reopen. And that's why a license agreement is a better choice, in my opinion, than a straight vacation. And I will be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions or comments from members of the council? And I do appreciate all the public comments, regardless of how they were conveyed. We do appreciate the input and have listened. I think some who may have stuck around after the meeting last week know that I spent a fair amount of time talking to a number of the people in the businesses about this very issue. So I've heard all the issues. I've read the Plan Commission minutes and discussed with staff, and I've also read the studies and the reports, and also know the history of this, and that originally our village staff, way before Flavorchem had even contemplated this campus expansion, was concerned about eliminating cut-through traffic on Brook Drive through this industrial park. And frankly was looking for a way to find a solution to stop it because it created issues with conflicts, both with vehicles and pedestrians. So there was a public safety concern that pre-existed this request. This request and the idea of helping a business expand and be successful in our community presented an opportunity for the village to do something that it had already identified as a goal, which is to enhance public safety by eliminating vehicular conflicts and vehicular pedestrian conflicts on Brook Drive by eliminating cut-through traffic. So that's where that came from. It's actually something that we thought would be a good idea before Flavorchem it happened to come into conjunction with that. So I'm convinced that this plan will not make traffic worse, but will actually reduce existing cut-through traffic, which is a good thing and enhances public safety. This plan, another concern that was noted was this plan will create additional truck versus vehicle conflicts. I'm convinced the plan will actually enhance public safety by reducing pedestrian vehicular conflicts due to the reduction in cut-through traffic. And that the plan also provides for, the revised plan provides for areas for improved semi-truck turning and backing movements that should actually improve the situation that's there right now. There have been comments about negative impact upon access to different properties. I'm consistent with Commissioner White and convinced that the negative impact that's been described is minimal at best and limited in its location, and that there remains access to two different points in the park, not one has been suggested. There have been some concerns about visibility. There are no visibility issues I've been convinced exist here. There was a question that was raised last time about whether or not the street name would require people to change their business address and loss of business identity. That is not going to happen, so there's no issue with respect to loss of business identity. And there will be no signage, I understand, on the 1501 and 1503 Brook properties, so those issues are not occurring. As mentioned, there are 2 access points, so there continues to be good ingress and egress to the park, which is, in fact, as the name suggests, an industrial park. And industrial uses are obviously encouraged. So it all comes down to the issue about closing Brookbank and whether or not it makes sense for the village to facilitate that through the use of a public street. One thing I will mention is this is not unprecedented, far from it. I can remember when this was done with respect to Permaseal, which had a very similar situation where there was technically a public area that they needed to expand their business, obviously a growing business in town, and worked out an arrangement as part of an economic development tool to allow Permaseal to basically utilize public street without us vacating it in order to enhance and allow for a business to continue to thrive within our community. And I know of other examples where we've done something similar. This is not unprecedented. It's a form of economic development incentive. Sometimes it's done with sales tax rebates. Sometimes it's done with reduction in fees. We always entertain proposals from any business with respect to economic development. If it makes sense for the community, it makes sense for the business, it makes sense for the village, it's something that we're willing to consider. So this to me is leasing this property to allowing a business to use it so that they can continue to grow and thrive and add to our economic base here for the entire community. Keeping everyone's taxes down is something that we have to consider in the big picture. So there's clearly a public benefit to this that goes beyond this industrial park. The other thing I just want to mention is that obviously we're not giving up this property. It's something that will remain the village's and will revert back if Flavor Chem ever moves. And in terms of losing tax revenue, clearly if the project doesn't happen, the street's not going on the tax roll. So I would add that to the mix here too, is we're not really giving anything up because it's not generating a revenue right now. And if they don't do the project, there won't be any revenue. So we're not really giving up any revenue in terms of it going on the tax rolls, which is something that we do take into consideration. So for all those factors and my very serious evaluation and assessment of the concerns that have been raised, I think this has been a product of good process and in the best interest of the community overall. So with that, I'll ask for a roll call, please.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace? Aye. Commissioner Earl? Aye. Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Matter passes unanimously. That brings us to the end of our active agenda. On to item 11, which is our first reading or our workshop agenda. We have 2 items on tonight's workshop agenda. The workshop agenda is a less formal part of our meeting where items are presented for discussion purposes only. No vote on any of these items will be taken tonight. Typically, we have village staff present the items for consideration by the council along with any petitioners, and usually start this segment of the meeting with questions from the council, and then we'll go back to questions from the audience. So with that, I will turn things over to our village manager, David Fieldman, for presentation of the items. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Tully and council. Thank you so much. Tonight, the first reading has 2 items, but it has to deal with one property on Ogden Avenue. Here to present information on this item is our Community Development Director, Stan Popovich.
Good evening, Mr. Popovich.
Good evening, Mayor and council. The item that I'm going to be presenting tonight is a special use of the variation of plat of subdivision for the property at 42 through 76 Ogden Avenue. The property is on the far east end of Ogden Avenue. It's a shopping center on the north side of Ogden between Cumner and Williams Street. The property shown, shopping center here is outlined in blue. It's the larger shopping center with the Panera on the west side, and then the former Caputo's building on the right side. This is a blow-up of the area. Again, the site that we're talking about is at the southeast corner of this property, northwest corner of Williams and Ogden Avenue. If we zoom in here, what we can see is an existing building in orange that's there. It houses the Starbucks, Panda Express, and Chase Bank, and some other businesses there. The petitioner proposing to install a commercial building here at the corner and have a drive-through in that facility as well, which is the requirement for the special use. One of the key features of the proposal is a new access point to Williams, which would facilitate traffic into the shopping center. The new access point does line up with the existing drive aisle there, so it would provide an area for cars to traverse the shopping center. If we zoom into the site plan a little bit, Ogden Avenue is on the bottom, Williams Street's on the right. You can see all the green space that's being proposed on there. Again, this is the entrance on William Street. It's full access into the site. Out of the site, there'll be a pork chop there, so you can only turn southbound to go to Ogden Avenue. You wouldn't be able to exit north into the neighborhood. We do have our 2 pedestrian connections that we require, so that would tie into the patio in front of the building there. And then the special use is the drive-through lane, which is going to go counterclockwise around the building and then exit out and into the front there, where people could then exit out of the shopping center as well. Our variance request comes at the sort of the point of that drive-through lane. It's really close to the common property line with the shopping center. It's required to be 25 feet away. And we see this a lot in our commercial properties where it's not feasible to get 25 feet there with the property line. So that's the variance request. There's no variance request anywhere near the residential properties to the east. This is the image of the proposed building. You can see a nice outdoor seating area for both of the tenants there as well. With regard to the plat of subdivision, currently it's a single parcel. The proposal is to divide it into 3. So you see the parcel in the lower right, which is the proposed building, and then the parcel where the existing building is parcel 2, and where the larger shopping center building is building parcel 1 or lot 1. With regard to the comprehensive plan, the site is designated as corridor commercial. The comp plan envisions reinvesting in the existing shopping centers and improving connectivity. We believe all those goals have been met. With regard to the criteria in the zoning ordinance, special use criteria, the variance criteria have both been met, and then the plat of subdivision of the proposed lots meet the requirements. That concludes my presentations. Ms. Pam Sullins is here tonight with the petitioner, if you have any questions for her.
Thank you. I take it the petitioner is not going to present anything further?
I don't believe so.
Okay, no obligation, just asking. Always want to give an opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Popovich. Questions from the council? Commissioner Barnett?
I just have one. I don't necessarily need to have an answer tonight, but I'd like to hear our staff as well as the petitioner's commentary on Williams and Turns. The adding of the drive-through, we have to assume, of course, there'll be some activity there that's different than the current Starbucks there. And we have that signalized intersection that sort of leads into the shopping plaza. We wouldn't want to create a situation at Williams that was difficult with Ogden, of course, is a high-volume, wide street. And if we have a lot of left turn attempts out of Williams going to east on Ogden, it could be a challenge. So that's my the only thing that jumps out at me as a little bit of concern is I wouldn't want to create a bad situation there. So whether there's a way to deal with that, or if there's some traffic expectations that it won't be a problem, I'm interested in that.
That would be the intersection of Williams and Ogden?
Williams and Ogden. Okay. And particularly, I'm questioning Williams to eastbound Ogden movements.
Okay. I can review the traffic study that they prepared. I don't have the answer off the top of my head.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments from members of the council? Questions or comments from members of the audience? Very good. Next item, please.
That actually ends our first reading tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Wow, just like that. Thank you. That brings us to item 12, the mayor's report, which is going to be much shorter now since the description of our board and commission appointment process was previously given. That is available for replay on our YouTube channel for anyone that wants to follow along. There are a couple things that I want to remind the public of from the mayor's report perspective. Number one is that we do have our monthly coffee with the council coming up on this Saturday, if I have that right, 16th?
Yes.
At 9 o'clock, from 9 a.m. until 10 a.m. In the vicinity of the farmers market. There's still a couple of more farmers markets happening downtown. The last one was absolutely gorgeous, and there were tons of people out downtown, along with the Fine Arts Festival that was, once again, a smashing success. Anyone who would like to speak with members of the Village Council on a more informal basis, please, Saturday from 9 a.m. till 10 a.m. down by the Main Street train station. We will be there with a sign and a booth, and we'd be happy to speak with anyone about any of the topics that we discussed tonight, or anything in general related to the Village of Downers Grove. We always enjoy engaging with anyone who might want to stop by and share their thoughts, suggestions, comments, or whatnot. And then while you're there, we just insist that you buy something from the farmers market because we need the sales tax. It's a joke. The next item is, I want to remind everyone, speaking of downtown, there's also a big activity happening this weekend, the 4th annual Downers Grove Oktoberfest, that is sponsored by the Education Foundation of Downers Grove District 58 will be going on downtown on Saturday and Sunday. Saturday, September 16th from noon until 11 p.m. and Sunday, September 17th from noon until 8 p.m. It's an opportunity to come down and enjoy true Oktoberfest fare and activities and music in support of the Education Foundation of District 58. So we'll look for many friends and neighbors down there during that event as well. I hope you can make it. Hopefully it'll be a good weekend. We won't have many more as we head towards the end of the year. That's all I have for the mayor's report. I will turn it over then to item number 3, our village attorney's report. Good evening, Ms. Pacharka.
Good evening, Mayor. Only one item to present this evening, that is an ordinance authorizing a special use for 4276 Ogden Avenue to permit a drive-through for a multi-tenant commercial building with a variation. That is all, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to item 14. This is reserved for council member reports. This is an opportunity for members of the village council to share with those in the audience and those watching at home either items of interest and other goings-on in the community or any reports with respect to their roles as liaisons to some of those boards and commissions and other public entities that we have here in the village. I'll start to my far right tonight with Commissioner Jose. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. No report. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Waldeck.
No report, Mayor.
And Commissioner Waldeck, it's good to see you back. We're glad that you're up to fighting strength again.
Oh, shout out to our largest employer in Downers Grove, which is Good Sam Hospital. Took real good care. I highly recommend it if they have to go somewhere.
Well, good. Well, we're glad to have you back in full shape. Thank you. Glad that went well. Commissioner Wallace.
Thank you, Mayor. You stole my report, though, so no report.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Commissioner Barnett.
No report, Mayor.
Commissioner Earl.
It is Library Card Month. So, library is giving out signs, if you'd like one for your lawn, saying, I have a library card. And all you have to do is ask at the library desk, and you can put one of those on your front lawn. That's all I have.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate you sharing that. Commissioner White.
No report.
Thank you. I have no further report, having stolen everyone's thunder, but we cannot adjourn yet. We are going into the committee room after a brief recess to continue our discussion of downtown development regulation framework. This is very important. A number of people have asked us about the future of the downtown, zoning and land use issues in that area. And this is part of our conversation about where things are going and how things should look and so on and so forth. So we hope a lot of you are sticking around for that discussion. We've certainly encouraged a lot of people to participate because this is the opportunity to have your voice heard about where the downtown goes in terms of its look, shape, feel, so on and so forth for years to come. And we're going to continue that conversation after a brief recess. So I'll ask for a motion to recess into the committee room.
Mayor Tully, I move that this council recess to the committee room.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We are recessed to the committee room. We'll start up again in maybe about 10 minutes. Look for you there. Thank you.
Video about the comprehensive plan as some background, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
The updated comprehensive plan was approved in June. Recommendations in the document will drive two major projects impacting the downtown: updating the downtown zoning regulations and creating a plan for the future of the downtown. The comprehensive plan provides numerous recommendations that are designed to help the village achieve its overall vision. These recommendations do not take into account fiscal or other constraints. Recommendations related to the downtown address the type and location of future developments, building heights and density, the preferred locations for additional parking resources, and which properties should be developed. In the downtown focus area section of the plan, the key concepts describe numerous recommendations to guide future planning and decision-making. This map depicts site-specific recommendations such as improved access, landscaping, and parking system enhancements. The land use and development map identifies redevelopment opportunities such as new mixed-use building locations and additional parking infrastructure. 12 catalyst sites identifying potential future redevelopment opportunities are discussed in greater detail. Functional sub-areas of the downtown are illustrated and described. This information serves as the basis for revisions to the downtown zoning regulations. Overall, the information contained in the comprehensive plan and specifically the downtown focus area section, will be a valuable resource as the village refines and implements plans to meet the needs of the downtown for decades to come.
Go ahead, Rick.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. Obviously, we were in the committee room for our discussion with respect to the two items that were just described, the downtown plans and regulations consistent with the comprehensive plan for the entire village, and also the future of the downtown. Just a few things before I introduce Dan Popovich, who has forgotten more about these things than I'll ever know. One thing that you saw with respect to the comprehensive plan, and more specifically the kind of things that we're talking about with respect to the downtown, there are two things to keep in mind. One, the land use and other regulations have the effect of guiding what can and can't be done in terms of height, width, setback, things of that nature, green space requirements, a lot that go towards what sort of the box that one would draw that something could be developed within. The other things that are in the plan talk about more aspirational things, and I think I want to highlight what was said about ideas where we would like the downtown to go, in particular developments that we would like to have happen, are free from any constraints of fiscal ability or private property owners actually wanting to do them. It's more of a plan of saying, well, this is what the community would like to potentially see happen in some of these spots, so that if someone is thinking, gee, I have a project I would like to do here, they already have somewhat of a roadmap for what the community is viewing as, well, here's something, if you're going to do something with particular this parcel in this area, here's kind of what the direction we'd like to go in. But obviously, we don't own these parcels, and we don't have the ability to make these things happen other than in conjunction with private citizens and private property owners. But it is sort of laying out a vision of where the community would like things to go should they be redeveloped. So that's the comprehensive plan with respect to downtown, and the regulations actually have to do with more detailed things such as size, bulk, density, setback, floor area ratio, all that fun planning stuff that makes Stan smile. The other thing that we're talking about, and stop me if we're not, is a sort of a related but also very important issue. It has to do with the future of downtown, and particularly some things that are going to be expiring in 2020. A number of you will remember that many years ago, the downtown was all torn up because of infrastructure needs. A lot of the infrastructure that was underneath the downtown literally dated back to the 1800s and desperately needed to be replaced. And the whole downtown had to be torn up, and that was a very expensive project. A tax increment financing district was created in order to help pay for the debt that was incurred in order to do that massive infrastructure project. And the idea was that future development in the downtown would generate equalized assessed valuation, increased value, and that increment could be used to pay off the debt, and that more or less seems to be, we'll see how it pans out, but it's more or less working, although maybe not exactly on the schedule that we would have originally contemplated. But that tax increment financing district expires in 2020. So the question is, if we do nothing, it goes away. Is that okay? Should we do something else? Rather than wait until 2020 and stand around and look at one another, we're trying to talk about these things now so that the next council, the 2019-20, oh my goodness, I can't even contemplate that, 2021 council already has some of the groundwork done for them so they can decide in advance what to do rather than just have something happen by default. The other thing that goes along with the tax increment financing district that encompasses the downtown is the special service area, or the SSA. The SSA is an additional tax that the property owners, residential, business, or otherwise, pay within the SSA that pays for certain things that are somewhat unique, if not exclusively unique, to the downtown. So you might wonder, why does the downtown have all these nice flowers and decorations? Why does the downtown have its sidewalks plowed? They don't plow my sidewalks. Things like that. And I'm leaving out many other things. Linda Kunze's looking at me. I'm not even getting close to all the different things. But Linda Kunze with the Downtown Management Corporation. The Downtown Management Corporation exists to help manage these, and the idea is the SSA is there to help facilitate a more successful, vibrant downtown, because, let's face it, the downtown of Downers Grove is both the geographic heart of the community, but it's also the emotional heart of our community. It's the gathering place. It's where we have our festivals. It's the seat of our government. It's where our police station is located. It's a historic downtown. We have a cemetery in our downtown. I think we may be the only one in the entire country where we have a cemetery in our downtown. There's a lot of things that make downtown very special, and the community appreciates that. Maybe not, but I'm on a roll. Remember that line from Animal House? When the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? That's right, he's on a roll. Let him go. So the idea is that, once again, the SSA will expire in 2020 because it's coterminous with the tax increment financing district. And what we're starting a conversation about is, well, do we just let that happen? Maybe. Do we do something else? Maybe. Do we do something completely different? Maybe. But we want to have those conversations now as a community, and particularly involving the people that are stakeholders in this heart of the community, the downtown, to speak to, well, what should we do about it? What should we just do nothing, or should we do something? If so, what? So this is the first conversation on that topic, because again, what we're trying to do is set the table and prepare the next village council with some groundwork, some input, some studies, some options, so that they can make an informed decision when that time comes. So with that long-winded introduction, I will introduce Stan the Man Popovich.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening again, Mayor, council members, audience. Tonight we'll be talking about the Downtown Development Regulatory Framework. These are the items I'd like to go over tonight: the project in general, the process, some of the recommendations in the comprehensive plan that were briefly shown in the video, the bulk framework, design, uses, and public participation. So those will be the topics for tonight that I'll go over in my slide presentation. So we'll start off with our project. You remember there's two projects that we're working with tonight. The first is an updated comprehensive plan, which was approved in June of this year. And the second one is to develop a downtown regulatory framework, which we're here tonight to discuss. There are three boards involved in this planning project. The Comprehensive Planning Ad Hoc Committee was appointed by the Village Council in March of 16. They developed the documents that we're reviewing in the comprehensive plan update. The Planning Commission reviewed the documents, provided some amendments, proposed amendments, and are recommending to the Village Council. And the Village Council is here tonight to review and provide direction. Looking at our schedule here, you can see that we've been at this for a while now. In April of 2016 was our first Comprehensive Plan Committee meeting to talk about the comprehensive plan, here shown in yellow. You can see we talked about the downtown here in June and July with the Planning Commission and Village Council, and went back up to become part of the comprehensive plan. And then the Comprehensive Plan Committee began working on the downtown regulatory framework here in January and February, while the Village Council and Plan Commission finished up the plan on the comprehensive plan. Then you can see the Plan Commission also met 3 times here through June, July, and August. And we're here tonight with the Village Council, in September. So we use a flight analogy a lot around here. So I just wanted to bring that into how comprehensive plan, our regulatory framework, and our development regulations are working. Comprehensive plan is really a 40,000-foot document. It's a visionary document. Provides guidelines, as the mayor said. It sort of idealizes what we're looking for. Again, it's not legally binding. Development regulations are the day-to-day stuff that the mayor says I so love on a day-to-day basis. And it implements the vision. It creates the desired outcome. It's our rules and regulations. So if someone wants to put up a fence, I can tell you where you can put your fence and how tall it can be, and if it's an open design or closed design. It also helps out with downtown bulk and all those density requirements as well. And it is legally binding. So we got the comprehensive plan way up here and our development regulation way in the middle. So the regulatory framework is sort of a 20,000-foot bridge, so we can come down and make it to our runway that we need to do. So it's a key concepts. It's meant for discussion, and it's not legally binding, but it is a way to bring open some ideas about how we get from the comprehensive plan's vision to our day-to-day regulations. If we look at the comprehensive plan, they identified 3 functional sub-areas. So the first was our downtown core, which is...
Could you kill the lights in the front so that we can see what you're putting on the screen?
Mm-hmm. Is that better? Great. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. So as I was saying, there's 3 areas in the comprehensive plan, functional sub-areas that were developed. The first is the downtown core, which is centered around Main and Curtis here, outlined in red. The key features out of the comprehensive plan, talked about this being the social and civic core, as the mayor spoke about tonight, is well walkable, gathering, commercial, and a 3-story maximum building height in this area to maintain sort of the core area that we see today. The second area that the comprehensive plan identified was the downtown edge, which is the area surrounding sort of the core and reaching out to some of the outer edges of the downtown. This area was a mixed-use, transit-oriented development providing greater density, some tall buildings in there. We talked about building height was a key item out of the comprehensive plan. Commercial more towards this core area, right around the core, and that way, and then more residential as we sort of went out from the core here and we meandered out into the residential neighborhoods in the white here as well. The final idea proposed in the comprehensive plan was the downtown transition area, shown here in yellow. So this is a little bit scattered about, but it's the areas that are close to residential neighborhoods and also are close to the edge, and in the case over here by the library, right up against the core as well. So these areas, like I mentioned, is a transition. It's less dense. These areas we would envision some yards and some green space, some open space to next to the buildings that are built. Comparable heights to the residential areas adjacent to it, and principally residential in most of these areas that we see here outlined in yellow. So those were three of the functional sub-areas that were identified in the comprehensive plan. In the zoning ordinance, we have two zoning districts. So the first here shown in red is the downtown business zoning district. So that's principally a commercial zoning district with some residential involved in it. And then the downtown transition shown here in the brown, which again is around the edges. So we have three sub-areas in the comprehensive plan and two zoning districts. So you can see we're already going between 40,000 and the runway here that we have. And so we'll go over these again real quick. Three sub-areas, the comprehensive plan, two zoning districts, and then we developed a regulatory framework. It identifies 4 zoning districts. So it splits the edge out into an edge 1 and edge 2. And that's based on the concept that properties closer to the core would maintain more of the core characteristics, where we maintain a street wall, buildings built towards property lines, not a lot of green space. But as we move out from the edge 1 to the edge 2, a few more setbacks as we transition from more urban commercial area into more of a open space with some apartment buildings and less intense uses in the edge 2 and transition as well. So we see 3, 4, and 2. And so if we go over the regulatory framework on where these areas are, the core again is the main and centered on Main and Curtis there. The edge 1 would be primarily around that, so we're going up on Main Street a little bit over to Forest and coming down and stopping at Maple here and over towards Washington and one property to the east there as well. The edge 2 is again moving out from the core, so we see some properties at Maple and Main Street in the southeast corner, Village Hall site over here, and then these properties on Warren moving up on the west side of Forest. And then our transition areas are on the outskirts here of the downtown as they get closer to the residential areas as well. So some of the key concepts that came out of and were developed by the Comp Plan Committee and the Plan Commission was a height reduction. So you can see the various implications of the proposed framework, which is reducing the height in some areas from anywhere between 1 story and 3 stories. So the 3 stories are in the blue, which is principally around the core area here, and then some of the other areas where we're transitioning from proposed look at having transitioned from downtown business to a transition area. So in the core in particular, the existing height is a 70-foot allowance. What's proposed is 40 feet or 3 stories. So you can't cram 5 stories in a 40-foot tall building. It would only be 3 stories. With the 2-story buildings, what we're seeing in the green, the 2 stories reduction in height, that's principally from the existing transition zoned areas to the proposed transition, which would lower the height in the transition areas from 60 feet to 36 feet. And then in the 1-story, which we see in the yellow, those are a slight reduction from 70 feet to 60 feet or 5 stories in height. So that's how the recommendations and the development of the Comp Plan Committee and the Plan Commission looked at height. And this is the proposed changes based on the framework as presented tonight. The Comprehensive Plan Committee also looked at density, and they also proposed some density reductions in here, a significant amount of density reductions around the core and then in some of the outskirts of the buildings there. What the Plan Commission recommended was a little slightly different. They took what the comprehensive plan said, and it came out as being trying to reduce density in the core here, which we see as a 6-unit reduction, increasing density around the core, maintaining the core as a commercial center, and having the residential more around the edges there. So you will see some residential changes into density allowances as well on some of the outskirts, on some of the properties in the downtown area there as well.
So to sort of put this into a perspective, into a real-world perspective, we're going to look at a couple of sites. The first site is a subway parking lot here at Main Street and Grove Street. So today, the yellow building would signify a building that can be built in the subway parking lot there. It can be 70 feet tall, contain 43 units, and provide 60 parking spaces. Under the proposed framework developed by the Comp Plan Committee and the Planning Commission, that building would be reduced to a 40-foot tall, maximum 3 stories, 37 units, and 52 parking spaces. So you can see the difference in height, 70 to 52, or 70 to 42. The units would go from 43 to 37, and then parking would reduce along some ratios as well. The next site we'll look at is the corner of Washington and Rogers. That's the southwest corner. Currently, that's zoned downtown business. So at this location, you can do a 70-foot tall building, 41 units, and 58 parking spaces. This is based on how we currently regulate density in the downtown business with units per acre, which is 54 dwelling units per acre is what it amounts to. And then 58 parking spaces here. With the proposal to a downtown transition of a 40-foot tall building that could have 40 units. The units don't change here much because in the transition area, we currently calculate unit requirements allowances on a floor area ratio, so it's a different determination of density. But what you would see in the transition area is we require 2 parking spaces per unit, so you would have 80 units. The other key thing here too is you can see the difference between these two is that in the downtown business district, you can build right up to the property line, and in the transition, there's proposed setbacks, so you have a little bit more green space in the front as well. And again, this is just a roughed-in box. Obviously, we would be looking for something a little bit more than my yellow box that I've drawn here on the property. That entails some of the key bulk changes that have happened. There's no proposed changes to parking that came out of the Comp Plan Committee or the Plan Commission. And additionally, there's some setback modifications as well.
And the yellow box is a nice transition to the design topic.
Correct. Yes, it is, Mayor. Thank you so much. So with regard to design and our design guidelines, the Comprehensive Plan Committee looked at those. They did not recommend any changes to the design guidelines that we currently use. The Plan Commission looked at these and recommended that we update the guidelines, that we tailor the guidelines to the specific districts. Design guidelines that might work in the core might not work in the transition area when we have a residential development versus a commercial development. In the core, we might want windows along the front facade, and in a transition area, you might not want windows wall to wall. Promote natural materials and include parking lots, landscaping, and lighting as well as that. So the Planning Commission did recommend some updates to the design guidelines that we could implement there. The regulatory framework also include a discussion on land uses. So the key concepts that came out of the Planning Commission were to maintain apartment and condo uses as special uses throughout all the districts in the downtown, from downtown core all the way out to the transition. And in the core specifically only allow residential on second and third floors and require some sort of commercial use on the first floor. So you wouldn't, the Plan Commission didn't want to see a parking garage with 2 floors of residential. They wanted to see commercial with 2 floors of residential in the downtown core. And then a recommendation to add a bed and breakfast use as a special use in the edges 1 and 2 zoning districts. Also, what came out of the Planning Commission as well was a lot of discussion on public participation, the need for the request for additional public participation and additional participation earlier in the process. So those were some key areas that were discussed at the Planning Commission. Public participation was not discussed at the Comprehensive Plan Committee level, but at the Planning Commission. That concludes my presentation. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them for you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of thoughts here. Obviously, this is a huge amount of information that's being presented here tonight. Because of that, staff knows that it's hard to process all this at one time. So we've met individually with each council member and showed them these maps in advance so that they have proper time for decision-making. And we certainly don't expect any binding decisions to be made here tonight. We're looking forward to the conversation. The main point here is that the comprehensive plan recommendations for the downtown were very different than our old plan. And so what you're seeing tonight, the work of the Comprehensive Plan Committee and the recommendations of the Plan Commission, staff feels would accurately implement the changes that are reflected in the comprehensive plan. And because there were so many changes in the plan, there are significant changes in the zoning and other regulations that Stan walked us through. So a lot of information here tonight, but we are happy to sort of get down into the details and in the weeds to talk about any of those things if it will help make the decisions going forward. But I will not be answering those questions. Stan is prepared to answer those questions. So. Mayor, we'll hand it over to you.
All right, so we'll be swearing you in tonight, Stan? Then we can find the lights. So after all, we do believe in transparency.
And illumination.
Yes, illumination is good. Much better, thank you. Well, thank you for that great presentation. I know that a lot of work went into it, and even encapsulating it in the visual way that you have, I think was very helpful, particularly seeing some of the things in three dimension make it much easier to comprehend, particularly if you haven't been steeped in this process for a long time. Well, I'm just going to open it up to conversation and discussion. As Manager Fieldman indicated, the members of the Village Council have been working with this for some time, leading up to this meeting, and I know have views, thoughts, comments. I deliberately tried to cover the waterfront in the introductory comments to allow everyone to weigh in. We're not going to resolve this tonight by any stretch of the imagination, but this is the opportunity to have a good conversation amongst the council members at the table here, and then we'll look forward to comments, questions, and input from members of the audience. I'll start with my colleagues. Who wants to kick things off?
How do you want us to just go, Mayor? You want to just try to start working through things, or do you want just sort of generic comments at the beginning, or how would you? There's a lot of stuff we'll have to actually.
Yes.
We'll actually have to at some point, maybe not quite this evening, but we'll actually have to come to a consensus on.
Yes. Well, the first thing I wanted to do was try to find out, and I think I got my answer. I was trying to tease out whether there's some burning issue that someone was dying to get off their chest. I figured I would have heard that in the last 5 seconds, and so if I haven't, I think we've gone past that point. So the next question is, maybe we focus on the building regulations first, if anybody has issues on that, and then we can switch to design, because I know folks have views on that. And I don't know if we'll have time, but do we contemplate getting to some initial discussion of future of the downtown, or we're going to deal with that later in terms of?
We do have just a status report on that project.
All right, so because I realize that conversation is just starting tonight. Right. These other items have been in the hopper for a while, but I do want to touch upon it because I think it's important to kick that off and stay, even though we have a long time frame, I want to stay on schedule. So why don't we talk about the regulatory framework first,
I have
and
a
then turn
process
to
question
design.
first. There's different this is a general question without any specifics. There's different recommendations coming from the Comprehensive Plan Commission and from the Comprehensive Plan Committee and then the Plan Commission and still others from the Comprehensive Plan. What's the timetable that's foreseen for council to resolve those differences? Weeks, months, days, hours?
Well, we kind of wanted to see how this conversation went, to see if there was sort of just direction that was pretty evident from the consensus from the council. If there's not, and there's some disagreement or initial thoughts that need to be worked through, we could take as much time as we need due to the nature of this discussion.
And I think some of us have said before, this is certainly not my idea, it's better to get it right than to get it done fast. But I do think, as is the case with other things, maybe I'm going to steal this from Commissioner Waldeck. The best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. There are a number of things that I think we can agree upon, and maybe we highlight where we have some perhaps different thoughts and ideas, and then we can figure out a timetable for addressing those, because I suspect that some of them might require more discussion, maybe some more information. We'll see where the public input goes. So I guess that's why I was trying to tease out where people's issues are, because I suspect that there's more that folks are in agreement on than they are in disagreement about or have questions about. So I'd kind of like to try to tease out what are the things that folks either have issues, questions, or concerns about, and let's identify those in some kind of a list, and then we can figure out what it takes to work through those on a timetable that makes sense. I'll let Commissioner go ahead. Commissioner Jose cedes the floor to Commissioner Waldeck.
No, my thoughts are pretty general. We've been talking 50,000, 20,000 runway. My experience on council is as we get into the regulatory stuff, is that councils have a history of taking the regulatory stuff as a guideline, and over the years, we've had density, okay, do you meet code? Well, I need a density change. I need a height change. We're going to rent or sell to Luddites who don't own cars. So what we've done is we've gotten ourselves in trouble, and you talk about the landing strip versus aspirational, and I think we need somehow to be more aspirational and realizing that whatever we do regulatory is bargain basement. And when developers come in, they're not going to say, hey, we got aspirations. What they're going to say is, we want to make money, and so we're going to do basically the minimum or less if we can get away with it. And that's kind of my background on this. So when we talk about regulations, we can expect that's what we're going to get, and or less. And that's my fear. I'd rather be aspirational. And I know recently the question came up, do you meet code? Okay, well, come on in. And there are communities that rely on their entities to be aspirational. If they have a lot of historic landmarks, the public expects them to enforce or to protect the landmarks. Recently, where I was at, we're afraid to talk about private property trees. While where I'm at, hey, trees are so important. Some family went out and decided to take a better view of the lake. They chopped down some trees and got an $80,000 fine. You want to light up your house? You can't, because you're ruining the view of the sky. So each municipality has its character, and it's up to the village council and the bodies that support it to meet those aspirations. And I think we ought to be more aspirational than just constantly looking at the bargain basement. And that's just my overall look at this. Am I a height expert? Am I a density expert? I know we got parking problems. So anyway, let's proceed. But I worry about the bottom line.
Understood, and I would encourage you, as items come up, if there's something that you would want to, because in other words, in order to be aspirational is great, but if you really want people to do it, you have to tell them what to do. And we have to be clear enough so that when someone comes to town and they want to do a project, they know what exactly it is they're required to do, so that they can attempt to try to meet it if they choose. My only concern is there's nothing wrong with being aspirational, but at some point in time, the aspirational has to come down to a more blueprint level. And maybe we just need to make the blueprints more specific in terms of the details so that you end up getting the finished product that you want. I just want to make sure that expectations are managed all around.
Sure.
I
just had to get that out there.
No, fair point.
Okay.
Not taking issue with it. It's just, I would like to see that translated into clear guidance, if not detailed instructions, so that the end result is what we want. What we don't want to say is achieve this, and then somebody comes forward with exactly what you described, and suddenly we don't like it. That's not very helpful either. That's not fair to us. That's not fair to the community. That's not fair to the person that proposes something. However we do it, it needs to be communicated in a clear way, clear, understandable way, so that everybody knows exactly that the end product will be meeting with. Well, you're never going to hit it spot on. And don't let perfect be the enemy of good, but that the end result is reasonably within the contemplation of the community and staff.
Let me offer a suggestion for moving forward with the discussion. People can tell me what they think. I found it very useful to pull out, actually. I turned the PDF into an Excel so I could put it in the format. The first 5 pages of the staff report are Stan's memo, and on pages 3 and 4, primarily, itemize articulate the differences between the different recommendations. And when you pull them out, I got a couple of copies I just pulled them out. That may be a framework. That's where they are pulled out. That's a framework for seeing where we agree and where we disagree. And for example, I'll jump into the downtown core. There's a disagreement between the CPC and the Plan Commission whether residential use should be by right above the first floor or a special use. Otherwise, basically concur. And I think, so for example, a preliminary question is whether this council is unified in the desire to reduce building height in the core by a rather significant amount. I mean, do we all agree on that? I know I do, but I don't know if everyone else does.
I think there's kind of three subjects: structure, there's design, and there's uses. Right? That's the three things we got to beat through. And some of the highlights are certainly here with those identified. There's also those summary pages near the end of the first section. Not those.
General key concepts?
No, hang on, sorry. These tables.
So you're starting with land use, Bob?
Land uses and design guidelines and zoning comparison tables. Those three elements. Those three, along with the those highlights, kind of touch on all the subjects we got to cover. The question is how you want to work through it, Mayor.
Right.
We can go in that order. And again, I wanted to initially find out if someone had some burning issues they wanted to raise. Let's get with that first. I haven't heard any. Bill shared his comment. We can take them any order they want. We can take them with respect to the more regulatory aspects, or we can take land uses first. And I think maybe we get to design next. So I think design will probably engender a fair amount of conversation. Greg?
Thanks, Mayor. I'm going to go regulatory. Dave, could you flip it one more?
That's where I was going to start.
Which way you want
to? To the density piece. So, Commissioner White kind of highlighted the kind of differences between what the Comp Plan Committee said and what the Plan Commission said. And to me, this is a key piece of it. There's a dramatic difference between this map and the next one. And in my mind, I'd rather go more toward what the Plan Commission is recommending here. Because we've seen significant changes in height regulations, I think we should be a little less concerned about density, because in my mind, a lot of the comments from the community have been bulk related as opposed to density related. I don't like that giant building, as opposed to, I don't want that giant building to have X number of units in it. And secondly, reducing the height is going to necessarily change the number of units inside, if for no other reason than once you start reducing the height, we're going to have to chop them up smaller, and they're going to become less economically attractive. The market will take care of that. So I'd rather see us stick in the universe of the bulk regulation as opposed to try to figure out exactly what density is going to be right for this area or that area of downtown.
So, Commissioner Jose, you said you prefer the Plan Commission recommendations, which is a reduction in density for many areas of the downtown, but not as significant as the Comprehensive Plan Committee's reduction in density.
Yeah, and frankly, I'd like to see us get a little bit of input from downtown management and the Economic Development Corporation too, to see exactly what the impacts of even the Plan Commission recommendations would be, to see what are the when the rubber meets the road. If we lower density in this manner, what kind of development projects are we likely to see, not see, etc.
Well, the Plan Commission is equal or greater, because it's 54 right now. But first I want to say I definitely agree that I prefer the Plan Commission's recommendation, and I would observe that the EDGE concept in the comprehensive plan was transit-oriented. And when you have 4,000 square foot units, it's hard to have much transit-oriented development. You're not going to fit many people in there. So, and as far as what the exact density is, we're getting pretty low at that point, and I don't know if we really should pull a number out of the air but by ourselves. But we're going to need input from downtown management, from property owners, from that kind of development as far as what can be sold in the marketplace to determine the appropriate density for really edge 1, edge 2, core, and transition. But I generally think the Plan Commission is more on the right track here.
Your concurrence on that? Okay. Commissioner Walnack? Is that okay? The Plan Commission approach to the
Yeah.
density? Okay?
Yeah,
Remember telling you?
Yes.
Okay. So why don't we move to height then? Similar discussion there. We had agreement in these concepts here that in accordance with the plan, there'd be some reductions in the maximum height of buildings that could be built. They're shown here on the screen. This is in line particularly almost word for word out of the comprehensive plan. Any concerns about this approach to the regulations that would apply in these areas? So you're looking at the 3-story buildings in the middle. They go up as you go out towards the transition, and they go back down a little bit, just as we talked about. And this framework puts an actual height limitation on it that Stan walked us through.
I'd be concerned, I have some concern with the north side of Warren. Not sure what the north-south street is, but to the far east in the area.
North side of Warren, the south side of Warren?
When you're going to work in the daylight? Yeah, right. So
That's
both
the
of
south
those blocks, those 3 blocks there, the portions of them which face Warren, I guess I'm thinking those are awfully small. I mean, that reflects current use, to be sure. But for living next to a 3-story apartment, it's not a very big building.
What do you have in mind?
I think those ought to be probably 3-story. And so you have the transition that effectively happens from 3 to 2, from 3 to 2 to our zoning.
Stan, could you just walk us through the maximum heights in each of these? I'll go back to this map here that shows the actual, this map. Could you just walk us through the maximum heights as proposed in each of these areas?
Sure. Soon. You think consistent with the
table out here?
Sorry?
Consistent with the new stuff there now?
Well, on the far end, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Right now, it's 2 stories only.
So in the downtown courts, it's 40-foot maximum height or 3 stories. And then as we go to the downtown edge 1, it's proposed to be 72 feet or 6-story. So that's to get you a 12-foot floor-to-floor height. And the downtown edge 2, which is these green areas here, 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 and here, that's a 60-foot 5-story height. And then in the yellow, the concept was to bring it more down into the residential scale. So it'd be a 36-foot tall building or 3-story. So in this area up here,
That shows the change. That map shows the change. Right. Right. So that's why I want to go back and make sure we're all on the same page. I think we're on the same page right there.
right, and the residential area is around, the height of the residential is per the zoning ordinance 35 feet.
So if Commissioner Barnett would read the table.
It's a lot of numbers.
So it sounds like we have concurrent. I would think we do because it looks like
You're entitled.
I think this is the most sort of word-for-word match to the planning documents that we had. Okay, so we're all on the same page, looking for heads nodding, for height?
Yep.
Okay, so that's height and density.
Subject to public input, yes.
Yeah, for now, right, at this point. Why don't we go to some land use discussions. There were some minimal changes, and I think a couple of issues that Commissioner White had started to bring up. Bill, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, these are just some of the issues that there's discrepancies between the Comprehensive Plan Committee recommendations and the Plan Commission recommendations, to what extent things should be special uses versus as of right, the density that we already talked about. And then, of course, the biggest difference, of course, is that when we start getting into design review guidelines. All this sort of jump ahead, just very briefly to tie back to the current discussion. We've been talking about wanting to get public input from all of the relevant stakeholders on these questions. And as you all know, many months ago, I first proposed a draft resolution to establish a comprehensive plan design review, a design review ad hoc committee. That committee could also be well-situated to receive the public input from the community, so that we don't listen to the people that come to the microphone and then decide. We instead have a committee that then listens to the public, because we're united, apparently, about reducing the height in the manner as been suggested. Does the public agree with us? And rather than have a parade to the microphone, create this ad hoc committee and enlarge the scope of their work a little bit to take public input from the downtown management and from the public and from Economic Development Corporation, basically to confirm whether or not the 7 of us are on the right track regarding overall height and overall density. And then we can talk later about whether it's appropriate to do a similar thing in the context of whether there should be design review guidelines. But rather than us like doing a straw poll under a constrained timeline and not knowing if everybody who wants to express an opinion has a full opportunity to do so. So we can enlarge the scope of my proposal for an ad hoc committee on downtown design.
Let me just make sure I understand this. Are you proposing, I'm just asking a question, are you proposing that basically we take this conversation we're having right now and assign it to a newly created committee that can then have focused discussion for whatever period of time on just that topic and then come back and give us input or recommendations?
Oh, actually, yes.
Because the only reason I ask is that then we already had the ad hoc committee, we had the plan commission, and now we're having another set of council meetings. It's sort of like we're setting the pitcher back down to the minors.
Well, the conclusions need to be to conform with. They're not going to rewrite the comprehensive plan.
Right.
And the documents we have say we're going to reduce height. So we can say we're going to reduce height and take that charge away from them. Or we can say that that's still something that's open to public input. Are we going to leave the question of height reduction? Will we take additional public input on reducing height? If we are going to legitimately take additional public input, I don't think the right way to do it is to have a handful of people come to the microphone in that other room, and then we vote one way or the other. I think if we're going to seriously consider going back on the plan commission, the comprehensive plan recommendation to reduce height in a rather dramatic manner, we need a more involved process before doing that. If the 7 of us agreed that we're going to reduce the height and what happens afterwards happens, well, then maybe we don't need to do that.
What?
We got input on this.
Well, I
made some changes in that interim period over the summer. We made some changes based on public input, specifically on height. I mean,
right.
Forest is one that comes to mind, and Rogers comes to mind in particular. I think there might have been some up by Summit too.
Yes. What I would suggest, I clearly, more conversation on this, the better, and certainly we've already established there isn't any deadline for resolving this. I don't have a problem with having more conversation. I just want it to be more purposeful and structured, because we have had a lot of public comment through this entire process. As Commissioner Barnett points out, there have actually been changes made because of public comment. We may get more public comment here tonight, and I'd kind of like to wait and see how that goes. If it turns out everybody sort of this process, we followed along and makes sense, then maybe we don't need to do that. I'm not suggesting that we don't have another meeting, and it doesn't have to be in there. We can have a special meeting, just talk about that issue if we find out that there's a big
pushback.
Yeah, right.
Because I personally have not heard it yet. It may be there.
Neither have I.
Right. But because I think basically it goes to the concept of preserving the look and feel.
Right.
And the idea of standing at the corner of Main and Curtis and do a walk around in a 360, look north on Main, look south on Main, look east on Curtis, look west on Curtis. And obviously the buildings themselves may change, but the character should preserve. And that's what keeps the unique identity of Downers Grove as being different than all of the other cookie-cutter suburbs that might exist. That keeps us our own unique identity. It's not those other suburbs are bad or wrong or worse, but we need to be unique. And preserving that 3-story inner core is one way to establish a unique identity for this community. And then, of course, we need transit-oriented development, and that goes to the edge, which then provides the customers to keep the businesses in the core successful.
Right.
And that's the basic approach. But if we decide that there's not pushback, so we don't need to revisit anything that's been decided. In other words, that's decided. There still are discrepancies, which, whatever so basically, if we're undecided, then we can get more, and if we are decided, then, okay, then there's no need.
And maybe that's the way to go through it, is there are discrepancies, and so far I haven't heard anyone say that they disagree with the Plan Commission's version. If there are, then maybe we should just focus on that and try to reconcile it.
Fair enough, okay.
Because we have, as I often say, these are recommending boards, and the ad hoc committee make recommendations to the Plan Commission, the Plan Commission makes recommendations to us. If we agree with the Plan Commission, then I think that
solves it.
Well, or at least that's the starting premise. But if there are points where someone looks at what the Plan Commission did that is different than the ad hoc committee and says, well, I prefer the ad hoc committee, let's talk about that. Or if someone says, I don't like what either one of them did, I want to do something different than both, let's talk about that. What I'm hearing is, I haven't heard anyone say anything that the Plan Commission recommended that they disagree with in terms of the regulatory framework.
So
I think that's the starting premise, and then obviously we'll hear more input from the group here, and we're not making a final decision tonight as to whether or not there are disagreements on that, and then clearly we'll be open to further input and conversation on those points.
So I'm going to throw out a suggestion here. I'm looking out in the audience, and I see a lot of familiar faces, a lot of downtown stakeholders, business owners, valued residents. Frankly, we didn't see a lot of them at the Plan Commission or the Comprehensive Plan Committee, and that's understandable. There's a lot going on, but we have the issue in front of us, and it's just so much to take in tonight in the way this has been presented. So what I'm suggesting is, now that we've had a good introduction and we've raised awareness, we could do a couple things. We could direct the interested parties to these reports where there's a lot of detailed information and take a look at it. And then perhaps we could reconvene and go through sort of district by district. We'll take this district and roll it out and say, okay, where are we? Get some input and go through that way. Because this would serve as a really good sort of overview of what was discussed. And there's some folks I know who are kind of looking to kind of get into the details, but they really haven't had the benefit of a detailed explanation.
And that's exactly what we want. And to pick up on your comment earlier, Commissioner, is there may be practical aspects of some of this that those who are more steeped in this than us, meaning us, aren't fully appreciative of, and I'm obviously want to hear that. I don't know if that's the case or not, but I'm really hoping that people will make me aware of it.
Well, then maybe having multiple public comment sessions might be
Sure.
by topic.
And take it bit by, I think we did that once before. It sounds like
So
deja vu.
rather than do all the topics, then take public comment.
We did it at the planning level, now we're going to do it at the
Right.
zoning
So
level,
the
right?
planning level, let's take it piece by piece, and
I
that
think
way.
We're largely agreed on height and density, so we got to find out if anybody here doesn't agree.
Because if there are people who have issues with it,
right,
let's address it.
Okay, so.
Quick comment. Looking at the Planning Commission recommendations, I mean, if they were all acceptable, theoretically, when things come through, the Planning Commission, if we happen to adopt all the Planning Commission recommendations, theoretically, when things come through to the Planning Commission, they should enforce it. which
I would
is a
expect a
problem to
positive
have.
recommendation.
Yeah, you take their recommendation, they should be willing to enforce it rather than sitting there and say, well, the other group said this, but we want to change it.
Does that make sense as a starting premise? And then we'll try to work through it in pieces to focus public comment on literally, this is sort of what we did with the comprehensive plan, right?
Yes.
That seemed to work. And it was nice because the folks that had a particular interest in a particular part of town knew well in advance, this is your part of town, please come to this meeting.
Downtown management.
The other thing I think might be of interest is we could work with downtown management now that we have the attention of a lot of the stakeholders and they're participating. We could actually hold a meeting that's just much more informational so that all the stakeholders have the details and then they can be prepared to comment to the council, because now I look around and here we see all the folks we've been reaching out to, they're here. So we could arrange for meetings that are more convenient and at locations as determined by Linda and those kind of things.
Let us help you, help us help you. Okay, and obviously we'll take public comment on that too, but I think does that sound like an acceptable operating premise to begin with? Breathe. Okay. Thank you. Don't worry about you. So land use, issues about land use. There were some notes in the Plan Commission recommendations about things to consider. What do folks think? Bed and breakfast.
I got the list, I don't want to be, community.
Oh, let's go to land use. We did regulatory, let's go to land use.
All right, so the
Then we'll go to design.
residential use is permitted by the right above the first floor. I guess I think we should consider that. That was distinct from the Plan Commission. There's a difference there. They would want those to remain special uses, residential uses above the first floor. I think we ought to consider whether or not we want those to be by right. That bed and breakfast issue was one that I thought we should not eliminate that. And then I had a couple others where it's kind of an opportunity to review our use chart. Now that we're adding 4 categories. So I want to just go through those.
Please.
In the, we call out building of tower-mounted antenna. We seem to be concerned.
That's going to talk to the
Oh,
microphone.
yeah, shoot, sorry, guys. Tower-mounted antenna, we talk about that as being a permitted use everywhere. We're concerned with character, building design, aesthetics. We're going to talk later about design guidelines. I guess I'm thinking that maybe we ought to consider whether we want that to be a special use as opposed to permitted use in all districts.
Choice
What's that?
on antennas?
I don't know.
We're talking about the small cell.
Well, we've got freestanding towers as special uses, and we have building or tower-mounted antennas, permitted uses everywhere.
Yeah, that's actually a good question. Question for our board. The small
Small cell legislation.
Small cell
maybe
legislation?
Not passed yet. But however, the tower antennas are probably, we'll look into that, but I'm pretty sure those are required.
If some higher authority compels us.
Yes.
Right.
So be it.
That may be dictated by the state.
A use that I don't, unless I'm missing how it might otherwise be described, I don't see the use of brewery talked about anywhere in here. And maybe I'm just missing where it could be considered. We've got eating and dining establishments, restaurant, wine boutique. We don't talk about brewery. I'd like to see that addressed there. Maybe it's artisan industrial. Maybe it's another way of looking at it. I don't think it probably is. But, and then personal vehicle sales and rentals. I think we all would probably agree we don't envision a car dealer downtown per se. But as we look at demographics and we look at transit-oriented development, I'm wondering if we are excluding, by the broad nature of that, other dealers that we would want to encourage to be downtown. You have other modes of transportation that people are starting to use. There's motorized bicycles, there's segways, there's a variety of things. So that's just a wording thing, and it's splitting hairs, but it's not for me to talk about it. I would hate to just de facto eliminate what might actually serve benefit to the concept of trying to promote transit-oriented development by just leaving all personal vehicle sales. So that was another one.
Is car sales versus car rentals?
Well, I guess that the one thing that comes to mind when you say that, Bob, is zip cars.
Sure.
So, which I've seen around in some places, but not necessarily around here, or maybe even a divvy bike, if that's what you're talking about when you're talking about rentals of a vehicle, I don't think right now we're encouraging. It's great to ride to the train station, but I don't think we're encouraging a lot of bike riding through downtown to the downtown and then walking around, I think was the thought when it was written. But are we doing something that's excluding those kind of opportunities where somebody who's taking the train in can get out from the train station with a zip car or something? Do those regulations? I don't think we need sales downtown, obviously, but maybe that rental or hourly rental.
Well, if they want to sell bicycles.
Well, frankly, anything that would reduce the need for parking would be something I think we want to encourage.
So this ties to this. It's this thought to me right now that if there was a divvy bike rental idea that allows you to keep it for 12 hours overnight. So you rent the bike,
At the station?
At the station, when you get off the train, you ride home, you leave it in your garage, next morning you ride back, turn it in. You put one of those at the train station. Commuters wouldn't need their own bikes, and they can only use it on days when it was...
Well, right, and that makes perfect sense, because it eliminates the need for new facilities down the road, if you can use those kind of shared services. So
I think that's probably allowed, but I think somebody should maybe try to do that. I think that's pretty cool.
Sure, that would be...
Should we look into that further? Because I think Nan has a lot of information on trends there, I believe.
Yes.
So basically, you'd rent it from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m.
To me, anything that reduces the need for additional parking would be something we want to facilitate.
Tonight, but it was just something to highlight that I would like to not, I'd like to us to all think through and
nice to
staff
raise
input on not avoiding.
I wouldn't want to abolish bicycle stores because we were getting rid of car dealers. I agree with that.
Well, or there might be other.
Right. Oh, sure. Segways or
Might be other motorized.
Particularly
motorized skateboards, whatever.
And you really want to have bicycles encouraged.
That's exactly right. Maybe even those multi-person bikes.
Hey, I'm all for segways.
And then I need a little help understanding. We've got financial service. I guess I'm thinking it probably refers to a bank. But then we have office, business, and professional as special uses, particularly in the DT area. Is that what financial service? We've got financial service as not permissible at all in the DT area, but we have business and professional office as a special use in the DT area, and I could see those being awfully interchangeable.
Like a stockbroker.
Well, yeah, broker-dealers are financial
Financial
services.
consultant, whoever, I just
Mortgage
wondering-
brokers, financial services.
Just wondering about those two things. In our new designation, we've got DT, not permitted financial service. So, it's another one that Stan or whoever can jump in and
We
straighten us
used to
out.
just want to have retail or sales tax producing businesses on the first floor. And it was disappointing over time that we gave up that goal, and you wind up having various other services that produce essentially no sales tax. I think the big controversy, I think the big one that came along was ATI.
I wouldn't go so far as to say that we gave up the goal. I think we've always tried to attract sales tax revenue generating businesses to the downtown for a variety of reasons. Sales tax revenue generating also foot traffic. But the reality is we don't own the buildings, and landlords are free to lease to whom they wish. And there are some companies that can write big checks to put their businesses on the first floor.
Some communities prohibit that by zoning.
Some communities prohibit that by zoning, and I meant to ask, because I know this came up before, 10 years ago, we looked at that real close, and it went nowhere. I don't remember why, but I don't recall a lot of support for it in the business community or the residential community. I'm not saying that is the definitive answer, because that was 10 years ago, but...
And the market's changed considerably
Absolutely.
in 10 years.
We shall have the benefit of history, that's all. I'm not suggesting that that's never to be revisited.
Address it through a special use, or I don't know.
But there's something for a focus, public input, because I again, I don't know what the reaction would be today, other than I know there's another call for exploring that, but I'm sure that there would be a variety of animated opinions on the topic.
That was one of the specific topics I thought might be suitable for an ad hoc committee.
I wouldn't disagree with you.
So let's have that conversation out there.
And then I don't know if I have a solution yet, but I'd like to find something in between blanket prohibition and, well, we really would prefer if you didn't, but there's nothing we can do if you want to. And whether there's some middle ground that creates meaningful, real incentive for property owners not to rent.
Right, carrot not a stick.
Right.
Well, I'd be open to an exploration of what those might be and whether they make economic sense.
And possibly putting it in special use, or...
So it's just talking about raising the minimum bar higher, because the minimum that we've been getting in any of these areas isn't quite what people were hoping for anymore when it's coming to fruition. Whether it's design guidelines, whether it's a building being built, it's not what that's what I've been hearing. It's not what the community envisions. And okay, you could do it, but is that's not what anybody was looking for. The minimum isn't good enough anymore.
Well, the purpose of this exercise is to define what does the community expect. And communicating that in specific enough detail so that someone, either an existing property owner or future property owner or current business or a future business knows exactly what the rules are. So that next time the community says, well, that's not what I was expecting.
Right.
Well, that's exactly what your expectations are. Well, I guarantee you're still going to hear that.
Well, we should put the question out there. Have serious discussion.
There's another topic which I'm not quite sure how it fits.
We're leaving this one, or?
No, this is all.
Uses?
It's all. Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. It comes from the Daily Herald article that just circulated, which is an excellent article, and it talks about that there's a multi-ingredient recipe for success in downtown. It's no one thing. It's a lot of factors, a lot of synergy coming together all at once. And in the context of uses, of having office uses adjacent to retail uses, which some of our retailers are very unhappy about, other property owners say that's the only tenant I can get. What are you going to do? Make me have a vacant building, which is a perfectly legitimate point. But then that segues, not the vehicle, that segues to what I believe is the one largest or the greatest ingredient we can add to help the success of the core, and that's to fill in gaps in the street wall. And that I'm not comfortable saying, well, we're going to create the regulations. If someone has a proposal to say we really like that, I want this council to be more proactive in actively recruiting businesses that can fill in gaps in our street wall. The U.S. Bank drive-through is a gap in the street wall. The parking lot immediately south of Subway, across the street from Emmett's, as he found us all across the street from Emmett's, is a huge gap in the street wall. And filling in those gaps in the street wall will create additional retail uses, which then will facilitate the success of the retail stores next door. Putting a building where the U.S. Bank drive-through is will help Anderson's bookstore immensely, because they got a pedestrian-based thing. And I'm not sure how, and I think it really hasn't been this village hasn't really done that so much, being proactive in recruiting, filling in those spaces, and I think we need to do that.
There's an economic development mantra that says you can do one of two things. You can either go out and find out what the businesses are that you want, find out what they are looking for in terms of the demographics, where they like to locate, and then create that and say, hi, this is where you like to locate, business X. We've created that. We'd like to do the old LaSalle Bank commercial and connect you. Or the other way, or maybe not or, and, because we're an and community, and you can also look at what do you have, and then go out and find businesses that want those types of circumstances in which to locate, and that chooses in other words, you can either choose the business and build your community around the business, or you can say, this is what I have, and then go find the businesses that fit that mold and recruit those.
And that's the second one. We say, here's a place to build a shop or a restaurant or an entertainment place with first floor retail, and this tosses in there too. I would include upper story bed and breakfasts in the core, and not on the first floor, but if they want to put a bed and breakfast over top of the store, I don't have a problem with that. But basically, some of this is private property, so we're going to need to create incentives to attract the kind of development of basically pavement. I'm talking about getting rid of surface pavement in the core and replacing it with useful buildings. And we may need to be more proactive in offering incentives to see that that gets accomplished.
Right. Well, then the key is to really identify what businesses with that kind of capital investment plan are looking to build buildings that would fit in that fill-in space that would generate the desirable uses that fall on our list.
Yeah, restaurants would be a prime example.
Mm-hmm. So we're all for rooftop cafes then?
Absolutely.
All right, put that on the list.
And a brewery.
A couple more uses here.
All kidding aside, the best way to attract people is with more people. People attract people. If you have rooftop cafes, sidewalk cafes, people.
Every
want to
list
rub
Mr.
it.
Brown is bringing up, bring up. We can say you can have one of those uses.
The grooming and veterinary care are permitted and special respectively in all the districts except DT. So I look at the DT map and think about existing uses and their compatibility. That seems reasonable to me that those would also be permitted in special uses in the DT area. And then one, I guess I need a little understanding of research service as a commercial service that is also a special use in all areas except the DT. It wasn't available in the DT before, but now that we're looking at this, I'd like to understand what that is. I'm envisioning consumer research or companies, things like that, as I look at DT physically. I can see a reason we want to prevent that use from occurring in one of those geographical areas. That was my list.
What kind of research are we talking about?
I don't know. That's why I need to understand. It's a commercial service called a research service, so I'm thinking about consumer research companies. A lot of people who do that kind of stuff. I don't know that that's...
biotech research.
Yeah, well, I'd say industrial. So I don't know, but I don't know.
Well, I don't know. Actually, the whole world of industrial, as all will remember from my National League of Cities presentation, is the whole world of the maker movement. Industrial is changing. But we all think of industrial as some big building with smokestacks, and that's not what a lot of the modern day manufacturing is. It's much smaller. It's happening in places you would confuse with residential.
Sorry, I forgot. I'm glad you said that. I did have one more, that artisan industrial. I'd like us to think through that as well.
Well, I agree. And then that happened. What was was it True North? Not True North. The hockey guys.
Up on 31st Street there? Yeah, Pro Stock Hockey.
Yes, Pro Stock, thank you. Where it was not a typical use in that facility, but that's just a recognition of the way things are changing.
If we're trying to be a destination of some kind, those, whether they're maker movements or whatever, or breweries or things like that, they separate themselves from other basic retail and can serve as a destination, as a draw. So I'd like us to think through the artisanal industrial as well.
I agree.
Board and Brush is not too far removed from that.
Sorry?
Board and Brush is not that far removed from
It's
that.
not. You start thinking about it. Exactly.
But then, so if instead of making that, you made something else that you might use in your household, artisan industry, absolutely, I want something like that.
Yep. Other land use issues? All right. Design?
Well, I'll jump
I think
in.
I know what that topic is. So let's just go ahead.
I'll do it very quickly. Well, first, the design guidelines that were published January 20th, 2009, basically, I mean, as somebody who's not an architect, they make sense to me. The pattern book makes sense to me. I like the pattern book. I like the design guidelines. I'm not sure that I'm qualified to really say that they're really current for right now, so I would like them reviewed by professionals with community input to determine what the design guidelines and the pattern book, perhaps pattern book, should look like. And then, as with the question of what do we do with first floor office and the core, I'd like community input on to what extent these guidelines should have teeth. To what extent should they be suggestions? We'd like you to do this, but if you don't want to, well, okay, that's okay. You comply with zoning. That's what the Comprehensive Plan Committee said. If you comply with the zoning code, we'll ask you, and if you say no, that's okay, fine, you can have your building permit anyways. Or are there some requirements? And not all the guidelines need to be enforced, need to have teeth. Some could have teeth and some not. And I'm not comfortable that this council can make that decision without further input from the community, primarily people downtown, whether they want this or not. So that's why, the suggestion originally, as we all know, that Amy Gasson and Rich Colavani came up with first, and I've kind of adopted to some extent, is not to impose design guidelines, but instead create an ad hoc committee, which will then go out and solicit community input on these questions. To what extent should design guidelines be enforceable? None at all. For certain guidelines, all the guidelines, I don't know the answer to that. And as you all know, at least around this table, maybe not more generally publicly, I drafted a resolution to that effect back in May, and we've kind of been sort of pushing it off to talk about it later. And I'd like that committee to go forward before we resolve the design guidelines question, because I don't really know where I will end up standing without getting further input from the community.
Certainly, community input as to what the guidelines should be in terms of updating is absolutely essential, but you just made me think of something. In terms of, it was a comment you made about the help of professionals. Is this something we ought to consider having we worked with a consultant with respect to the comprehensive plan, because it brought that professional, they do this thing before. I think that obviously the community input is key. But I'm wondering whether we want to work, and just picking what you said, I think that's what made me think of it, is working in conjunction with professionals. Not that our own staff are highly qualified professionals, but for example, for this kind of a specialized, focused effort, we utilize professionals to assist.
Just let me clarify my thought first very briefly. I'm speaking of people with that expertise from the community. For example, what you said about putting somebody from a retired EPA person on the Environmental Concerns Commission. I'm not saying, well, we should go out hire a consultant. I want to hear from the architectural professionals, the engineering professionals, the development professionals, and the building owners in our community.
Sure. Well, not just
process,
not substance.
Yeah. And to give this, if we were to establish such a committee, to have them get professional guidance from consultants at a reasonable amount, I have no problem with that. But when I talk about, what I say is that I want people who are in the business of building buildings to participate in both what the guidelines should say and what's commercially reasonable to make enforceable. Because I don't want to say you got to paint, because some communities have design guidelines say we will build a Swiss town and every building will fit with a Swiss town. I don't want to do that. That's way too detail oriented. And if there's certain things that an architect or a builder can do relatively easily, which then is consistent with some of the goals, then we make it mandatory. If it's something that's more problematic, and where those boundaries fall, I don't know.
Well, and community input clearly is informed community input, no question about it.
That might be a better way to say it.
But I was picking really up on, is there, and I'm not answering my own question, I'm just simply asking a question as to whether or not having a professional who has worked with communities before doing this exact kind of thing elsewhere can help with the process.
This helps immensely.
Well, yes. Right.
Which was done with the help of a design consultant.
That's my point.
Right.
I'm not suggesting that we use those people as the exclusive arbiters of taste. I'm not suggesting that. Clearly, that's got to be, to your point, Marge, what are the community's expectations? Well, it should reflect what the community's expectations are. Understanding that those will change.
A little town on the Rhine. That's what
Right, because in the 1970s, community's expectations would have been olive cabinets with orange countertops. I don't think we want that.
Well, that makes a point, though, Mayor, that's important in terms of this enforceability, or teeth, as Bill used. And we suggest here that if they conform with zoning, that they're more optional, for lack of a better description. That, I think, is important, because it forces us to try and get this right. And the form of these buildings is, I think, as important as anything. One of the things we keep talking about is the unique nature of our community and how we like our community, and we do. But one of the things that's unique about it is we've got orange cabinets and olive appliances in some places. The fact is, if you stand down there and start looking for stuff, that's exactly what we've got, an eclectic mix of a lot of design periods. And so it would be, none of us are going to sit here and say we don't want community input, but we've got community input from professionals on this subject matter to a large degree. If we want more of it, if we all would feel better with more of it, certainly that's fine. But the general premise of the teeth, no teeth, and how far do we go, I'm pretty comfortable with what's here. Want to update it from 2009, that's fine. But the structure of how it's applied and how it's used is what I'm most comfortable with.
Well, let me give one specific example I think is very important for the downtown core. One of the recommendations is that the businesses along Main Street have plate glass fronts. I believe that should be mandatory. That if you own a business between the tracks and basically Grove Street, you cannot have a solid brick wall on the front of your building. you have to have plate glass, because the walkability for retail consumers, that by putting a solid wall in the middle of a walkable commercial block will destroy the business of the neighbors. So that's a type of design regulation, and to say you have to have a plate, they talk about a plate glass front with, another thing about, they recommend, or they say that, this thing about what goes underneath it, that the plate glass doesn't go all the way onto the sidewalk. First of all, I don't think that's terribly burdensome. Second of all, I think to have that regulation as a requirement, not just, well, it'd be nice, but as a requirement, would definitely enhance the retail success of the entire street. And that's, so when we talk about how far we go, that's something now. Now, there's other guidelines. I'll say, well, we are an eclectic town, and that's why there's not particularly, so being eclectic isn't the problem. But having something that's friendly to the pedestrian shopper doesn't have to be, and there are experts on exactly what works for that. And plate glass is one of them. Being able to see into when people walking on the street can see into the buildings, it's a much more friendly, pedestrian, shopper-oriented, friendly environment. And if you can't see into the building, it's off-putting, and people don't want to walk there. If they don't want to walk there, they're not going to shop in the stores, no matter how much parking we have. So there are things, there's a fair amount of expertise, which I don't have, I know exists, as to how we can create design guidelines that will make the cross, which is our downtown core, attractive to pedestrian shoppers.
I'm not disagreeing, but I think that's what we have.
No, but it's not mandatory.
It's mandatory in some circumstances. And there are certainly buildings downtown that are not working against our friendly downtown that are not plate glass.
But as I said before, though, that's my opinion on it. I don't want to simply vote and impose it. That's why I want to get the ad hoc committee to look into that.
You're talking about new construction or when there's a substantial renovation. You're not saying if there's a restaurant that it already exists, and then it, for whatever reason, goes out of business, and a different business comes in that's not food service, they have to put in a plate glass window.
Well, open doors, for example, what Gatto's can do, where they can open up all the doors, that works too. I mean, but something like that. Because when the doors are open, you see where
for example, the Valley Dwell goes out of business next week, and an antique store goes in there. They're never going to rip out the whole walls and put in plate glass. It's just not going to happen.
Isn't this, though, the result of the ad hoc committee and the comp plan and the comp plan commission? I mean, aren't we dealing with input from professionals as to how to get at this? I mean, that's what I guess I'm I'm just missing the point.
Well, I mean, I don't,
That's how we got to this, what we have right here, was by two sets of entities with which we've entrusted the professionals to give us recommendations on.
Yeah, I don't know if they were specifically tasked with the question of should elements of the design guidelines be mandatory.
Well, they did. They commented on it.
Yes.
Gave us some suggested direction.
Yes.
With which I agree.
But ultimately, well, yes, but ultimately it's our decision. That was the well, okay, fair enough. I mean, you're saying you agree with that, but I'm hearing that other people are taking that as a recommendation, because obviously with the ad hoc committee, there were things that we didn't agree with. We just all said that. Because the plan commission did something else, and we went with that.
Yeah, I don't mean to say that everybody's got to agree with Bob. What I'm saying is the process. The process that got us to this point included asking professionals to weigh in and recommend and suggest something. So asking for more professionals to weigh in and recommend and suggest something doesn't make a lot of sense. Maybe I'm missing Bill's point.
I think it's a different set of things we're asking.
Okay. Well, the question on the table is, by what process? Let me back up a minute. We get the sense that some, I haven't heard from everybody, some of us would like to explore whether or not some of the design guidelines should be mandatory, meaning they're no longer guidelines. They now become regulations, requirements. That's question number one. And then the question number two is if people have issue with the guidelines / regulations, should they be changed, updated, or whatnot? And we can make some of them mandatory. I mean, plate glass front windows with one. You can make other ones too. That's really the question.
Well, one way that can be solved as far as there being regulations is that you have design guidelines, and the building may not comply with everyone, but if they substantially comply, then a citizen body can say, yes, that's close enough to our design guidelines, you're approved.
Well, my real question, are you talking about creating basically a stormwater floodplain oversight commission for designing the downtown?
Well, I think about...
That's basically how they operate.
I have to look into that more, yeah.
I don't know if I want to go quite that regulatory.
But once again, I'm not sure I want us to be deciding in the next month or so.
I'm not suggesting that.
So therefore, we get input from other people as to which way we should go on this. Which gets back to the ad hoc committee.
Well, I don't know if the ad hoc committee is going to decide whether they should be a
It gives us more
regulatory
information.
commission or not.
No,
It's really our job.
it gives us more information on which to base the decision.
We get
With citizen input.
You're getting input
We're gonna get some in a few
from the
minutes here.
public,
Stop
from
talking and let people
stakeholders. But at the same time, we can also look at how those design requirements, suggestions are handled outside in other communities. So you're studying what can be mandatory, what should be, how other communities handle that, and you're also getting input. The businesses in the downtown may have a totally different take than the property owners. So you got two sets there that you have to deal with too. So you're getting input from outside the community as well as the stakeholders.
I think we should hear what the public has to say
I think
before any more of
people-
them flee.
Right.
And we're simply circling around now, right?
Yes,
Right.
we are circling
Yeah, I
around.
think we need to.
We haven't even gotten to the last topic yet, but we can
I know.
take a pause.
But we're losing people, so, and that's what we were saying we want, is public input, and the public is leaving in twos and threes, so.
Well, it's probably an overly ambitious agenda. All right, we'll pause for public comment, either on the proposed regulatory framework, land use, either as recommended or with the topics and change that have been discussed, or the topic du jour, which is mandatory design guidelines. Mr. Mosey.
Thank you. Do I need to stand up or?
No, we can hear you.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Mayor, Council, staff. Just some comments, not to anything specific, but basically the overall plan and project. Stan, you've done a great job putting all that information together because it's going to take people weeks and months to really dissect it. But I think the three main areas mean a lot. But I just want to kind of share a story rather than give my opinion, because I think stories tend to tell a lot more fact than people just giving their opinion. We can go back 20 years to the TIF and the SSA. The reason we're having these discussions is because we have a vibrant downtown. And people have heard me say that a lot, and I'm going to say it again. We've got 99% occupancy rate. So this is all taking place because we don't want nor can we afford to harm the downtown. Everybody agrees that's the core. It's the central part of everything. Now, having said that, there's things that are in the core and on the other sides that in essence all come together. So if we look at our history, the SSA is an integral part of why downtown is as strong as it is. It's allowed downtown management to be your ambassador and do a hell of a lot more, basically, than anyone in this room can imagine. And I don't mean any disrespect to Mike if he was here from EDC. I wish he was, but he was under the weather. Your downtown management, in essence, is an EDC to the downtown, okay? And so it's very important that that entity is something that needs to go forward. And I know the mayor has said, do we change it? How do we do it? Is there another way? I'm a believer of history repeats itself, and God rest my dad's soul, but 20 years ago he stood up at that podium with 3 pages, and I think it might have been Cheevers or Sandick was the mayor. Anyway, he just reamed them and said, after 20 years, no tax ever goes away. Taxes never go away. They always stay. And I'm sitting before you guys today to tell you that tax or that SSA needs to stay. Because my dad looked at it one way, we own property in the downtown, but it's worked. The SSA works. So to me, that's an integral part of this whole discussion of what we're doing. And if the old adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I don't think the SSA is broke. I don't think it's close to being broke. It's worked very, very well to keep the downtown very vibrant. Having said that, the EDC part of it is that downtown management is very responsible for bringing in the businesses that we have. And a part of that going forward, and in these discussions, I hear you talk about plate glass windows and retail first floor. My input on that is very strong. I think because of the footprint in the downtown has changed dramatically, Main and Maple, multi-density housing and all this other nonsense, we cannot afford to lose any more of the core footprint. Once it's gone, and we've seen some of that already. So it's important now when we fill in these street areas that Mr. White talks about, and we look at current businesses that we have downtown, we've got a stretch on Main Street, and it's no knock to the current businesses, but I say about history, years back, many people probably remember Mr. Altman, who built the nice flower shop and everything, and I was friends of the family. And I remember, I said, man, you got it made, you're going to be right on Main Street, nice office. He said, oh, no, I'm going upstairs. And I'm going to have the downstairs retail. So that's something that we need to, as a body, keep that in mind, because we've got some businesses on Main Street. ATI, okay, it'd be great to have retail, but they sell product too. They generate a little sales tax, not much. But on Main Street, we've got a couple realtors, and it's no knock at the realtor, but I wouldn't want to see an accountant there. I wouldn't want to see a travel agency there. I wouldn't want to see a lawyer there. So in this planning and everything that's going on, I think we do need to look at a way to come up with to protect that footprint from a retail standpoint. And then getting into the logistics of the multi-density and everything, I think Stan's plan and your plan is great, because it kind of broadens everything away from the downtown. I mean, we're going to have 250 people, 500 people in all these new units coming in to shop in the downtown. The worry I have is, where are their friends going to park? Because we don't have any parking for those facilities for visitors. So in your discussions on the parking, I'd like you to consider another high-rise in parking somewhere in the downtown and or underground. I think with engineering the way it is these days, I think some things can be done underground as well as above ground. And I like the ad hoc committee concept, because we have invaluable resources of citizens in this village that could come together and help with some of those things at no cost, rather than the village having to go out and spend some money. So, it's a lot of different things, but I think they all come together. It's either a Lego without instructions, or it's a puzzle. And either way, it's all got to come together. And from the SSA to what you're all doing, to the parking, to the whole thing, it's one heck of an undertaking, because you're either going to have a great legacy when you all leave in 2 years, or you're going to have one tough legacy. And it's something I wouldn't want to have to necessarily put my name on, but I think it's something that you've taken a great responsibility to put this thing together. And community input's good to a point, Bill, but at the same time, you've got already a core of information there. Now I think it's just kind of fine-tuning it, and there's some gray areas perhaps, but in the final analysis, parking is number one. Keep the SSA and look to maintain the core as it is, with maybe some new retail bits to the core. And sure, there can be residences above it, but we can't lose any more of the core. And in particular, I'm talking Main and Maple on the other side of what's going on now. We would lose 4 or 5 businesses if we took that out of there. So it's very important that any kind of future that takes place, we maintain retail. We have to maintain retail on the first floor. We all wouldn't be sitting here if that wasn't the case. 99% occupancy, and people are dying to come down into Downers Grove. And I'll finish it with this, and again, these are all stories and truisms. Rexnord just signed on to make their world headquarters here. And the reason they did, the final antidote, was Michael Casa brought their execs and staff to the downtown, and they said, you know what, this is where we want to make our headquarters. And that's not the only business that's done it recently. If you ask EDC, there's a couple ones up there by Butterfield and Finley, same thing. It's a place that they wanted their employees to be able to come to. So that's where the downtown core has a huge effect on everything else around our village. And so with that, I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Graham. Other questions, comments?
And I'll be on your ad hoc committee.
Really?
Sure.
I got one.
The wife never sees me, what the heck?
Please.
One thing is, Mayor Tully keeps talking about, oh, we don't have to do this like anytime soon, and like, is there a time limit as to when you put this plan in? Because my thought is there a freeze on current downtown development? Because you talked about that big parking lot by Subway, and if you take 2 years to do this, somebody could come in and put another 70-foot building there. So that's a concern. So to move this along, there's a number of units talking about kind of does count because you got parking, traffic, and just to be honest, pets. If they're in downtown Downers Grove, where are they walking all these dogs? That's an issue with the Maple and Maine. Not a lot of green space. I think in terms of requirements, you need a cup. If there's stuff you really want, like plate glass windows or setbacks, or you can put tables, or I think you need to ask for those because otherwise you're never going to get them. If they're just guidelines, we already know how the guidelines go. And then you keep talking about public input. Have you ever thought, and I don't know how well this would work, there's all these online surveys where people can go in and check boxes or make comments. That might be a way, because I know I've seen things pop up on Nextdoor.com and Facebook, village notices and stuff. So would that be a way to get some input from people? Some of the people don't have time and don't want to, or don't realize they can come to meetings. So that I don't know, because that was just something that I thought might be of use. That's about it.
Thank you, appreciate it. Other questions, please, sir.
Okay, well, first I'd like to say, when you were saying about how you reached out to everyone, the first I heard of any of this new plan, I think, was basically 3 o'clock this afternoon, that there was even going to be a discussion on this. So I don't think there was much reach out as far as what you've said. Second off, I can't say anything about the rest of this plan for the village, but I do know in the area, your graphs in the area of Rogers Street do not depict what is actually there. The buildings you have on Warren Avenue, the multi-family unit, what you have is on Warren side is 3 stories, but what you have from the Rogers side is basically a five-story building, brick wall. What is basically what we look out of our back window when we see a 5-story brick wall. So my problem is now, if you start restricting the height of the buildings that you were saying, you want to go down to 3 level, I can understand that when you've got that next to residential, but that's like building a multi-story building next to a single-story residence. You wouldn't want that. Well, you don't want to do it the other way out. Force people to have a 1-story or 2-story building next to a 5-story building. I think it has to be, you have to look at, the demographics of exactly what that particular street or that particular area has. Plus the fact that the setbacks that you have from the sidewalk and then the easement in the back. Now, you've given that building on Warren a zero easement, which put that right on the property line. So basically, like I said, what we have at the end of our property is no easement. We have 5-story brick wall. By restricting that now in that particular area, that when we go to try to sell the property, that restricts who would be willing to buy that property by so much that devalues our property even more. And that would do the same thing with the rest of the people on that block too, because now that you've allowed that building to be there and you start having these setbacks, I mean, you're basically cutting down half of what they can be, what type of a building or structures can be put in that position. I can understand, like I said, when you're doing that in other residential areas, but what you have allowed to be built there now, you need to change, look at what you have, because like I said, his graphs do not depict what you actually have. So.
I follow you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Other questions or comments? Yes, please.
Yeah, I just try to attend as many meetings as I can, and I know there's conversation about public input, and I think, frankly, a lot of it is concerned where people just feel it's a waste of time. You come to the meetings, basically it's all been voted, approved, or done, and I don't think people feel like what they have to say counts for anything. And so it's like, why should I go? Why should I waste my time? If you could get, I'm all for a survey, if you could do some kind as far as, in guidelines, certainly to protect downtown. Basically, our core is what, 2 blocks. And Mr. White, I certainly agree with some of the comments you were making about trying to protect that, enhance it, and that's the beauty of, it's a good asset for us here. Downtown is, I would like to see some input from other towns. If you visited, say, Hinsdale, Glen Ellen, Geneva, to me, that's one of the best towns to go for shopping. The town is attractive. The buildings are related in architecture, and I mean, it's not hodgepodge by any stretch. It's just maybe have some conversation with some of their people and see what they do. What kind of, do they have guidelines? I'm all for guidelines. We need some. I feel like we should get back in the driver's seat. Sometimes I feel the developers are driving this boat. Comments from those 2 monsters that are going up on Maple and Main Street. Unbelievable that those things were approved and how they went through. I don't know. Nobody in town likes them that I've talked to. Nobody. Now that window's open, is that going to be what we're going to run into? It's like, well, you let those go through, then why can't I build my building? A good example, probably the next one in downtown will be the building that's just north of there. Now it's one building, an old building, standing there next to the parking lot. How are we going to handle that? Because every developer obviously is going to come in and they want to maximize what they can make on their investment. They don't really care, what the public has, because they put the money in their pocket, they leave. We have to live with what they've left behind. Traffic and everything. Traffic is getting worse. I never see that discussed at all. Anything that comes through that. No, nobody ever seems to care about traffic. Well, we have to live with traffic. Our downtown it's hard enough to get through there. Not counting the trains. But, there's times I circle 2 or 3 times to try to find a parking place. And we're not talking about a big town. But the new buildings, we have no idea what kind of traffic that's going to add to. And whatever's coming up online, which we don't even know about yet. So, I don't know. I'd like to see some guidelines. I think we have a right to protect what's coming in. Doesn't mean you have to do this, you have to paint it green, you have to do this. But to have some guidelines, say architectural guidelines, to maintain the character of the town that people like in the big, it's our home. So, that's my spiel. So, I'd like to see some of that in place rather than just whatever comes in, well, we're going to take it because we need the tax dollars. Well, sure, I understand we do need tax dollars, but that shouldn't be the only item. It should not always be priority. Tax dollars, let's pass it. We need the tax dollars. And that's the feeling I get here in town anymore. We don't really care. We need the tax dollars. So, anyway, something to mull about.
Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing that. Other questions? Please.
Similar to his point, I mean, we've been talking about community involvement and this stuff, and it's difficult. You guys have a difficult job. Nobody's gonna, I certainly don't want to sit in any of those chairs. But, you know, you talked about earlier that the ad hoc committee recommended to the plan commission. The plan commission recommends to you guys, and then you guys are making a decision. So you look and say, how much really community involvement is really involved in that process? So maybe a survey, is it, we got, what, 48,000 people, you're gonna have 50,000 opinions, or pick a number, you know, you're just gonna have a lot. So it is a tough job. When we talk about community involvement, we just had Flavor Chem, and the community involvement up there was, we don't want that. What I didn't read through all this stuff, you know, it's one of those things, that's a community within our larger community, and for whatever reason, people think, all right, this is the right thing to do. That's your job, that's your decision. Plan commission, I think, voted against it. You guys can change your mind, but we got community involvement there, and it seems like, to your point, it wasn't heard. So then you get to people are like, we're not going to come. Maine and Maple, Marquee. People didn't look at it and go, holy cow, what is this thing? Again, so maybe community involvement came a little too late on that one because you had this. So to this lady's point over here earlier, let's get something done. And if we have to change it, we can do that. As things evolve, we can go ahead and change it. But I think it's important to get that community involvement. And I think that's good enough for now.
So you're saying not just the community involvement, but the community involvement earlier in the process?
But really here, because again, we talked about, you know, the ad hoc said this, plan commission says now, they concurred on a lot of things, don't get me wrong. But on some of the things, to your point, Bob, why can't it be an as of right for residential on the second floor? Somebody wanted a special use. And when you start getting into those things and developers come into town and they're like, well, I'm going to have to get a special use. What hoops am I going to have to jump through to get that? We had it with Village Hall. We went out with, asked for proposals. People gave us what they thought. And they ran them through the mill. Those guys are gone. I mean, we're basically telling the business community we're closed. And it makes your job tougher. Fortunately, 99% occupancy. That's a great thing. But, you know, and even in the community, Dave, you mentioned talking with downtown management and stakeholders downtown. Stakeholders as the tenants, they come and go. Stakeholders as the owners, yes. But the bigger stakeholders are the community that are going to go down there and shop, and they might hear that and say, why do they get a different meeting than the rest of us? Again, it's just more community involvement. And it's a tough job. You guys got a tough job, but just some things to balance and think about.
Thank you. And I think I speak for my colleagues where we do listen, but you can't always equate being heard with doing exactly what you want, because we all ask for things, and sometimes you don't get what you want because people disagree or there are reasons for it. But that doesn't mean just because the outcome isn't what someone asked for, it wasn't duly considered. And that's what I try to explain. It's all duly considered, but ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to make a decision based on competing interests and oftentimes multiple perspectives. And by definition, not everybody, if they're asking for 7 different things, you cannot do what everybody wants. You try to do the best you can for the entire community with the information you have. But that
I
doesn't
don't
mean
think anybody's that naive that thinks that you're going to get whatever you want all the time. And we tell your kids that. You know, sometimes you just got to suck it up. You might not like it. Sometimes it's easier to just keep your mouth shut. You know.
Again, thank you for being here for the comments. And frankly, if we didn't care about this stuff, we wouldn't be having these meetings about changing them. Because obviously we have heard a great deal from the community about having to revisit these things. And that's why we're going to spend a lot of time and effort and late nights actually looking at it. Because it's important to the community and it's important to get it right. Other questions or comments at this stage? And by no stretch are we done with this topic. Any, sure.
I was just going to say thank you, Mayor Tully and Village Manager Fieldman, because the questions that I've been getting now that this is coming out more and more are, where's my property? I can't find it on there. How high can I go? I've been envisioning, to go up 4 stories. Now I'm down to 2. So I think an open meeting with the property owners and whoever wants to come, I think would be a really good idea, just to alleviate some of those issues. And my issue is always, I noticed on the downtown core district, the first plan had recommended uses, this one just has uses. So with all the new concepts that are coming to town, all the new different types of business, I just want to make sure that you're open to some of these. And I love the idea that we have a little space on Rogers, a little space on Warren, because we do have. I have a performing arts center that wants down here so bad, 5,000 feet, and it just, I don't have that space in the downtown to do, but they all want to be close proximity to the downtown so they can use their restaurants and enjoy the evening, enjoy performance. So that's my only hope, is that you'll keep it open so we can add some new and interesting things. Thank you.
Last comments from the council? Anyone didn't get to say something?
I believe
I got cut Greg off at least twice.
I believe downtown management emailed out those PDFs, or a link. We emailed out a link to the village website for the 100 and some page document, so.
I think we put it on Facebook and then.
We did, but I mean, we're trying to get them engaged a little more.
We appreciate that very much.
Yeah, because we don't want this, for me, and to share what this gentleman was talking about, what you've got to understand is over the last year, different committees have put different pieces and elements together to get where we are today. So where we are today has been going on for over a year, and it's been out there to the public, it's been on the website, it's been on Facebook. So how do we reach, we have the challenge with the property owners. We have a luncheon once a year, and we barely see any of the property. They don't care, as long as they're getting their rent checks. Now, they will care if it does affect 3 floors, 4 floors, but we want them before that point. So we're trying to get them before that point. I think that's what this council is trying to explain, and has done a great job of getting to this framework. Now, when it's the 11th hour, it's like the plants come out of the ground. They've been nowhere, and now they're all coming out of the ground. And as much as I respect that, having been in this process for so many years, we can't continually do that, because one of the gentlemen said, okay, is this going to be 2 months, 3 months? Is somebody going to come along and want to build a building? Something's got to be enacted quickly, so we don't have another Maine and Maple situation. That's what this is trying to avoid, and to keep us growing. So just an FYI that this has been a year and a half almost, and everybody's been informed, so it's not like they haven't heard about it. They just, for whatever reason, they don't want to get engaged when they're getting their hands dirty. They don't want to get engaged when they're throwing the mud, and we've got to somehow turn that around. I'm a resident, I'm a business owner, I'm a citizen. Not everybody wants to be here at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, but unfortunately, it's people like everybody that's in this room that makes this stuff happen. So tell your friends and neighbors to get involved, because everybody here wants them involved. So we don't want the same olds all the time. Neither do these people. They don't want to see us all the time. Sorry, David.
All right, well, I couldn't possibly.
So, this is usually the point in meetings in this room where I say, we had clear direction tonight. And Mr. Paradis usually makes some comment to me about whether we did or did not. So this is a first in a long time. We don't really have clear direction yet, and that's okay. What we're going to do is take what we learned tonight, regroup. I'll talk to individual council members. I'll reach out to Linda and Graham and others in downtown. We will move this forward in a timely manner. We don't know exactly what that is yet, but we will communicate out to all folks involved. So if we learned a lot tonight, well, we don't have clear direction yet, so there'll be more to come. We have one other item planned tonight, and that is a very, very brief status report on the other project, which is just kicking off. It is called the Future of the Downtown Project. What we did here is planning and zoning. The future of the downtown project is finances, roles and responsibilities, and budgeting. We're just starting that process. Here to give us the first status report on that is our Deputy Village Manager, Mike Baker.
Thank you, Dave. Fortunately, I can keep my comments very brief because a lot of the discussion earlier this evening touched on things that I probably would have already covered. So thank you, Mayor, thank you, Graham, and others who have already begun to hit on the topic. It really was interesting to listen to the conversation and see how the intersection between zoning and some of the other elements that are important to people as it relates to the downtown came into the conversation. But in terms of the status report, yes, staff has been hard at work. A lot of information gathering and analysis has been taking place. And as we go into the coming fall months, that'll shift more into an engagement process and heavily involving our partners at Downtown Management, as well as other key individuals and groups in the downtown. And so we'll have some more information on how that'll take shape and what that'll look like. Ultimately, the project will result in a report and a plan that's presented to council in approximately October of 2018. It'll be about that 20,000-foot level, referencing back to the flight analogy again, to, as the mayor suggested, really lay the groundwork for future decisions that will be made in the years to come. But we have a great opportunity right now, given the fact that we're in the waning years of the TIF and the SSA, and because we have a comprehensive plan that was just recently updated and adopted that is so rich with guidance and recommendations on a number of ways that we can improve the downtown. And so that's how we're trying to make use of that information and ultimately turn it into a valuable planning tool for us going forward.
Thank you. Just to underscore one thing, I think it is prudent for us to explore options, and it may be that what we're doing and have been doing is by far the best option. But the only way we will know that for sure is by looking at other ones, and if it is, that will be apparent. It's just a natural time with the life cycle, if you will, coming to this point to look at things. 10x number of years ago, we did that with the Downtown Economic Development Corporation. We looked at other options, and it turned out there was a better path. There may not be a better path. This may be the best path. But as we do with a lot of things, every now and then you just have to revisit it. It's just as simple as that. So we'll see. I'm looking forward to options and suggestions from both internal and external.
Mayor and Council, that's all we had for you tonight. We're happy to answer any questions.
All right, so unless there are any long monologue speeches.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.